What happened that made you go from stable relationship to, oh, I need a restraining order? We were actually engaged to be married. Then she went on holidays without me and came back pregnant. She then told me, "You've never done anything to prove you really love me. Accept this baby and help me raise it to prove it." I declined and asked her to leave the home that I paid for and that was in my name. She refused, so I made arrangements, cancelled my lease, then left and told her there were 4 days left on the lease, I think. She wailed, "But what am I supposed to do? I don't have a job." After the constant mental beatdown from her, I started suffering from ED at 22 years of age. Eventually, I mustered the courage to leave her. She quickly moved on to someone else who had later become her husband and called me every week to basically rub it in, saying how much better he was than me, how much bigger he was than me, all that stuff. So I moved out of state, changed my number, never heard from her again. She called my parents and even showed up at their home, but they told her to go away. About 10 years later, my friend ran into an old friend of hers. Apparently, she had been arrested for attacking her own mother, got out of jail, attacked her husband, tried to take her kids from him, was arrested again, and later released. I guess I dodged a huge bullet there. Mine cheated on me the day my dad died. He sliced himself in front of me and then threatened to kill my cat. I was young, dumb, and thought that I was in love and ignored many red flags. As he got more comfortable around me, he let his crazy out. Someone stole his cell phone and he asked me to purchase a shotty for him so that he could go and shoot the person who did it. It took me another 1.5 years to leave. I did try breaking up with him, but he told me that if I ever left, he'd kill everyone I love and then self-delete so I'd know what it was like to be truly alone. That relationship ended up with an order of police protection. He was nuts. We met online, we both had video games in common, and we hit it right off. Fast forward 2 years and we got engaged. All was well, until he started getting violent toward me and our pets. I felt stuck because I couldn't afford to live on my own. Then he went on a business trip and I found a bunch of truly reprehensible adult films containing illegal subject matter hidden on a flash drive. Turned it in, he got arrested. Turns out he was also hiring working girls and stuff. He's in prison now and it's illegal for him to contact me. Oh boy, kinda thought a lot more of these stories would be exaggeration and the restraining orders would be wishful thinking. Turns out we have a bunch of legitimate domestic criminals lined up. Yay! I graduated, she wanted to transfer schools, so we moved to a college town where she told me she had been accepted as a transfer. Turns out the transfer hadn't been accepted, and when she reapplied, that wasn't accepted either. She got a job at Walmart while trying to figure out her next move. After about 2 months, she decided we should move to Pittsburgh. She's convinced this will solve all her problems and make her happy. Except we're in a recession and I just got my first good job. I don't want to move. She became very aggressive. I didn't want to go home. She was constantly negative and on the edge of a screaming fight. I was just avoiding her at the end. We were together 4 years before that, and she was always moody but never prone to these violent outbursts. 6 months of that, she went home to her hometown to take a semester at a local school and stay with her parents. I called her 2 weeks later and told her to not come back. It had been like a weight was lifted from me, and I never wanted to see her again. Listen, I'm glad you got away, but why Pittsburgh? Specific reason? Pittsburgh has magical properties in the water that make all of your troubles go away. I live here, and I know. There's no problems at all. None. Stop looking at me like that. Everything is fine. The weather is perfect. The roads are great. Everyone gets along perfectly fine, I swear. It's great. Everything is wonderful. I moved my ex in way too early. She hated where she was living and I wanted to help her with her mental state, so it seemed like a good idea at the time. She didn't have a job, so I paid for everything. When she finally did get a job, she'd keep all of the money to herself and then quit out of nowhere after a couple of weeks or so. Slowly but surely, she started mistreating me in pretty much every way apart from the stuff in the bedroom, and like a frog boiling in water, I allowed it to happen by justifying it to myself. I even found out about financial abuse being a thing. You know it's a great relationship when it teaches you about a new form of spousal mistreatment. She used her mental issues to manipulate me into buying her so many things, including a frickin' $600 or $700 laptop. As soon as I ran out of money, we started having problems, and 16 grand in credit card debt later, she broke up with me and continued to live in my apartment for another couple of months. She was on the lease, so I couldn't kick her out because legally, the apartment was hers just as much as it was mine. She finally moved out on my birthday, the last December. I'm still picking up the pieces. I dated someone for almost 3 years, starting back in grade 10 in high school. Everything was great for the first year or so, and he treated me well, and we had some things in common. Didn't realize until after we broke up how much of a grade A neckbeard he actually was. Thought for a while that if we stayed together after high school, we could get married because he was my first relationship and I felt like I loved him so much that I'd marry him. Then, about 1.5 years into the relationship, he started to show his true colors. His family never had much money, so sometimes I'd help him to pay for stuff. He started to yell and scream if I didn't give him money to buy some game or food that he wanted, and many times he'd embarrass me in the middle of public settings like Walmart. My parents sometimes would also help pay his gas, and that got to a point where he'd come to ask my parents for the money because they hadn't given it to him yet. I didn't want to give him money all the time and even tried calling him out on it. But he'd always scream and yell saying, "How dare I tell him not to take my money, blah blah blah." He generally became emotionally and financially controlling. I didn't know financial abuse was a thing until after we broke up, and the incident that made me really stop loving him was the night he committed the unspeakable act on me. He finally decided that waiting for me to be ready wasn't enough, so he took it. We still dated almost a year after that, but I was just there out of fear of what he'd do if I left him. I finally left him the next year, right before my birthday, after finding out that he'd cheated on me with my now ex-best friend. I wish I'd said something sooner to my parents, but I only told them 3 or 4 years after it happened. Now I hope I never see him again. We were in a long-distance relationship for over 3 years and eventually it started to fizzle. She'd tell me to move to the States and drop my college degree, my family, and my animals to live as an illegal immigrant and that I could just do whatever odd jobs I could just to be with her. I told her I needed to wait. She'd get very upset every time I went out with friends and would bombard my Facebook wall with random crap and send me private messages with passive-aggressive insults and threats of her not being alive anymore. I'd travel up there twice a year whenever I had vacations from uni and spend about 2 months with her, which were always great. She'd just get incredibly possessive and insecure when we were apart because my social life started to blossom down here and she was scared I'd meet someone else. Once I stayed for 6 months until the very last day of my visa. I broke things off with her and moved on, but she kept messaging me asking to be friends. I tried, but she'd randomly blow up at me, insulting me for ruining her life by making her think she could be loved. I told her that she did deserve love, and she'd get even more upset. We just couldn't talk at all. Then she messaged me many years afterwards, telling me that I had a legal obligation to marry her since I said I would 5 years ago, and therefore she expected me to just fly up there and fulfill my obligation. Had to block her. I started dating this girl during my junior year of high school. We dated for about 7 or 8 months when she started becoming a huge flirt. I don't judge, but it's not something I could emotionally handle, so I called it off. I started getting closer to one of my best friends as she was a huge support during the breakup, and eventually I caught the feelings. My ex did not like that. Late one night I saw her flexing her dad's 9mm on her Instagram and in the comments saying, "I'll shoot the both of them." I went to the dean's office at school the next day and she got arrested and spent the night in jail. Actually did end up giving a no-contact order. Yep, that's several orders of magnitude beyond a red flag, isn't it? A red roadblock? Anyway, folks, when you see your exes moving on, surviving and thriving is the best revenge you can get. Public declarations of oncoming vengeance are much further down the list and not really very sensible. I was dating a guy who was very sweet in the beginning. After about 6 months, he got possessive. He didn't trust me. An example of this was one night I told him I was meeting a friend I used to work with at a bar about a block away. We lived in a safe area and it was a short walk. Her name sounded like it could be male or female, but I assured him she was a she. He showed up at the bar while we were there and it made him look very insecure. He began tracking my phone's GPS. I found out when I stopped at a relative's house after work on my way home and he freaked out and called my mum. She actually knew that was where I was, and he had a very hard time believing I wasn't cheating. The last straw was my first week at a new job. I worked nights and had my phone. I got this long-winded email regarding an innocent comment on a Facebook selfie of me. There were screenshots of it and a huge manifesto about why my buddies online all wanted to take me away from him. After I broke up with him, I got emails for months swinging between apologies and telling me I was awful. I also got a variety of emails from fake addresses, all concerning him. It was insane. Started dating in high school, had some ups and downs, but at the time I just chalked it up to us being immature. My last 2 years of college really proved that he had some serious issues. When I moved out of state for good, it was like a switch flipped and he got extremely possessive and controlling. He wanted all of my friends' numbers, gave me a schedule of when we need to be in communication, and if I missed any of it, he was blowing up my phone with threats of self-deletion. Finally got the restraining order when he showed up to my friend's apartment looking for me, threatening to call the police because I still had a pair of his shoes, which I didn't even have. I found out that he was attempting to solicit minors. Like a record scratch, it was over. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This is about my sister. She and her ex dated on and off in high school. At some point in the 8th grade, he admitted he was in love with her, and she admitted she had feelings for him too, so they started dating in the 10th grade. I told her something was off about him. I'm not necessarily an intuitive person. I try my hardest not to judge a situation too quickly, but something about this guy just rubbed me the wrong way. They dated for about 6 months, and he began showing signs of a behavior that really set the alarm bells ringing. Like others have stated, he began calling her and keeping tabs on her. He demanded to know when she made it home and when she went to sleep. He demanded that she edit her social media, MySpace at the time, to include pictures of them and only them so everyone knew that they were together. She visited me in hospital. I had severe stomach flu. Something wasn't right and she told me she wanted to break up with him. She told me she was a bit scared of the guy. He was big, maybe 6'4" and about 230 pounds. My mum begged her to end it with him and she did. The calls kept pouring in for about 2 weeks and she did her best to avoid him. Once I was back in school, I happened to catch an encounter between the two of them. He had her pinned against her locker, telling her she wasn't leaving until they talked things out. I told him to back off and he threatened me, and then she threatened him. He stormed off, punched a locker, broke 2 of his fingers, and then dropped it for a little while. He popped up a few years later on the morning of my sister's wedding with a love letter. We're not sure how he knew she was getting married. We'd all had him blocked on social media. The letter was mailed to our home, which she no longer lived in. He hasn't come around anymore, but honestly, I would not put it past him. My sister's husband is an avid hunter, so that might be what's keeping him away. I'll throw my hat into the ring here. I dated a girl years ago. She was essentially everything I thought I wanted in a girl. She was cute, funny, liked just enough things I liked for us to have common interests, but just different enough to show each other new things and experiences. I was heavy into her and she was heavy into me. Then things got weird. She started getting jealous of high school friends I'd known way before her, and even went as far as telling me I wasn't allowed to hang out with some of my female friends, except for the few she thought were uglier than her. And things got worse. She started getting jealous of inanimate objects like my game consoles and video games, some of which she gave me. It came to a head when my grandmother asked me to watch her dog. It was a tiny little hand dog that I adored, and one day I was half asleep and saw her literally kick this tiny dog off my bed with her feet. I asked her what the hell her problem was, and she told me that she doesn't like that I give the dog more attention than her. Things got even worse. She'd physically bully me in little ways when I did things she didn't like, such as bending my fingers or hitting me in the face, stuff like that. Eventually, everything I did she didn't like. After a while, I got the courage to dump her, and she tried to tell me she was pregnant to keep me, which was an obvious lie. After that, I discovered she'd still stalk my Facebook page and told some of her friends and our mutual friends that I was mistreating her. I also learned that when I was away, she'd let dudes feel her up and other stuff too. Luckily, I've landed a great girl that cares about me and isn't a jealous psycho like my ex was. Yeah, this is pretty dangerous. This sort of person seems to happen across both genders, and I suppose you can just be thankful that she was presumably limited in how far she could go with the physical violence, although I might just be assuming that she was smaller. You really can't win. You can either get an awful guy who's more likely to have a physical advantage, or someone who can fake a pregnancy and claim you forced them to do things. Lose-lose. Just run when bad people of either gender show their true colors, I guess. I was dating a guy. I really liked him. He was smart, funny, adventurous. We were getting pretty serious. He pretty much lived at my house. One weekend I went home for my dad's birthday. All of my brothers were home. I have 5 of them. We ate, drank, and were merry. One of my sister-in-laws took some pictures and posted them on Facebook with me tagged in them. Got back to my house Sunday evening and my boyfriend was coming over shortly to hang out and spend the night. When he got there, he was basically frothing at the mouth. He shoved me and called me a working girl. Started pushing me around, ranting about how he had to see me making seductive poses all over the internet and hanging out with a bunch of guys. I told him they were my brothers, but at that point, I was already done with him. I told him to get the F out of my house. He took that as an invitation to throw me up against a wall and try to force me to kiss him. My roomie heard the commotion and came out of her room with a baseball bat. That moron made the only good decision he had made that day and decided to leave. kicked in a pantry door and wrecked some drywall on his way out. I threw all of his stuff in a dumpster. He ended up stalking me for years, showing up drunk at places I'd moved to after we'd dated, calling after I'd changed my number, even texted me on the week of my wedding to ask me to reconsider marrying him instead. Yeah, you crazy F, I want to dump the love of my life for a crazy stalker. We were spending a large amount of time together, with me staying at his house several nights of the week. He went mad one day because he said we weren't spending enough time together. He pulled out a notepad and drew up a schedule outlining in excruciating detail each hour that I'd spend with him throughout the week from then on. I distinctly remember sitting there, saying nothing and feeling like I was in the twilight zone. Things got significantly crazier from then on, but that moment always stuck out in my mind. The worst version I have of this was a guy who I'd been dating who rammed my truck with a moving van repeatedly at an immigration checkpoint in New Mexico well after dark. He thought it was funny. He had been behaving badly, but I thought it was just the stress of the move. The aggravated attack by U-Haul is when I decided to break up with him. He stalked me for years after that, pestering me at work, which led to me getting fired. I switched from law firm to legal software, and that seemed to make it harder to find me. His stalking ended with him blowing up a brick-and-mortar mailbox with plastic explosives. I think he laid low after that because the FBI were after him. He eventually moved back to California years later. An ex-girlfriend of his contacted me about 7 years later when she was settling his estate. She wanted to make sure there weren't any children. Started dating not long after a previous relationship. At first, everything was amazing and I did everything for this girl. For my 21st birthday, we went to Alton Towers with 2 of my friends, one boy and one girl. We stayed over at the hotel. We were all in the same room having a drink and a laugh when suddenly my girlfriend stormed out of her room for no reason. Rightly so, I follow her back to our room to ask what's up. Before I could even finish my sentence, she punched me square in the face, gets me to the floor, and then kicks me about 5 or 6 times. I ask why, and it's because I'm apparently always looking at my friend, the female one. Anyway, in the morning we set off home and I assumed all was well. We drop my friends off and as I pull up to her house, she puts her feet on my windscreen and kicks it 3 or 4 times, cracking it. Not sure why I stayed with her for a month after this as she scratched my face repeatedly when I accepted an old school friend on Facebook. I started dating this amazing girl, but she was just getting out of a very traumatic marriage and I was her first female partner. She started showing up at my work with flowers and coffee, which was sweet, but I'd never told her where my office was. Then she started showing up at my house at all hours and would get upset when I needed to sleep. I worked graveyard shifts. She then wanted me to meet her daughters, which I wasn't comfortable with because we were in the first stages of a relationship. I decided to break it off. She was just too needy, which was understandable coming from someone who'd just left an awful relationship and discovered their sexuality, but I wasn't the person that could guide her. She decided that I was just afraid of love and started leaving books of poetry on my porch and leaving long letters in my mailbox. I finally had to call law enforcement after I came home to her in my bed. She had taken a ladder to my second-story room window, I lived with roommates, and she had broken in. I found her undressed in my bed, covered in blood from several intentional incisions. She proceeded to tell me that I was the only thing keeping her alive. I cut off all contact, but I truly hope that she's gotten some help and is doing well. She was a wonderful woman, but so broken. It's good of you to be able to see her qualities. A lot of us would have had a very hard time seeing the positives in someone after finding them bleeding out in our bed, and possibly thinking that they'd passed away there. That's a super scary image. I hope she got the help she needed. My relationship with my ex in uni seemed really great. He loved me a lot and was super attentive. I even went on holiday with his family at some point, and I thought we'd marry eventually and start a family. Long story short, when I got busy with school, the final year, and didn't see him as often, he started getting clingy and jealous of everyone, including my female friends. I tried to break up with him probably 3 times before he accepted it. I explained how I wanted to focus on my studies and the situation wasn't good for either of us. The last time he seemed to understand my point and we remained friends. This also didn't last long and he eventually started stalking me online and in person and constantly bothering my friends. He managed to go to my senior year party even though he wasn't in my year. Eventually he texted me calling me a skank and that I'd cheated on him, all the usual accusations. He told this to all of our mutual friends in uni, so that was fun. He acted like a total lunatic, begging for me to reconsider a friendship after that, but obviously there was no chance of that. The last straw was him showing up at the graduation ceremony, making it awkward for me and all of my family. She punched me in the face while I was sleeping. Apparently, my phone had woken her up when I received a text in the middle of the night from a girl asking if there was any chance I could come pick her up. My girlfriend assumed I was cheating and figured that the most efficient way of addressing her concerns was just to punch me in the face, hard, while I lay there sleeping. The text was from a non-Alabamian cousin who had some sort of semi-emergency and needed to get picked up from a party. He pushed a little girl in a store because she tried to pet his emotional support dog. Instead of just picking up the dog, he laid hands on a little girl. There's a lot more to that, but that one sticks out the most. I recently found out he was arrested again. What was the strangest way you've seen someone quit? My boss, in retail, called me into work for noon and was showing me how to check the company email and set alarm codes for the doors and then gave me the password to his company BlackBerry. This was strange, and then when the regular guy came to start his shift at 1, he closed the store and came out with all his stuff and said, "I'm officially done with this company as of right now." The phone started to ring and I reached to grab it, knowing this was the district manager, and not wanting to confront him, he literally ran out of the store and I haven't seen him since. Apparently, he had just emailed the district manager to say he'd resigned and wanted no further contact. The other guy and me have only worked at the store for a month. Not my story, but my boss's. She worked at a very busy downtown restaurant and brunch spot, and the line would be flooded with tickets for hours on end. One day, one of the line cooks just stopped amidst all of the commotion, stood up straight, paused, grabbed all of the tickets off the line, scrunched them into a ball and put them in his pants. He then put his middle fingers up, rotated to face everyone who was watching in horror, and walked out. This has since become one of my favorite stories. Holy crap, working as a chef in a cafe that can get busy, just the thought of all the tickets being gone horrifies me. I used to work at a fast food place in a small town. We had the run-of-the-mill, so-and-so was arrested, guess he's not working here anymore, happen more times than I could count. But the best was when someone didn't show up for his shift. The manager calls his phone and he doesn't answer. It goes to voicemail. He changed his greeting to the following: "F you, I quit." Talking about co-workers arrested, back in the 80s I was working midnights. We had a co-worker turn to us at shift's end and tell us, "It's been a pleasure working with you. Turn and walk away." When we called after him asking if he'd quit, he said, "Not exactly," and went out the door. We asked the boss what was up and he had no idea. That evening he was on the news for robbing a bank and then being caught minutes later strolling down the street with the money. Turns out he had acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And back then, most treatments were experimental. The company insurance didn't cover treatment, but he had read that people in prison were getting treatment for that disease, so he did what he felt he had to do. That is quite the workaround. I'm not sure that prison inmates were prioritized for that treatment. Correct me if I'm wrong, comments. My high school summer job was at Burger King. One year they put me on the schedule when I was supposed to be at sports camp, 6 hours away, and I said, "No, like I told you 3 months ago, I need those 2 weeks off." And they replied with, "Well, you have to come back to work, then just go back to camp." And I was like, "Okay." So I drove back home and quit. When I got home, there was a manager on the phone for me saying that they have a no quitting policy. I was like, "Okay, well, I quit, so…" followed by awkward silence. Then she hung up on me. We walked a guy we'd fired down to security, and he hugged the old security guard for like 10 minutes in silence. I was once giving a course at a company HQ in a room overlooking the front door. I was just explaining company law for engineers when the entire IT department left the building with their belongings in black plastic bin bags. Since it was IT department, maybe they were outsourced? My first IT job out of college was in a large call center for a large bank. I worked there less than 2 months and wasn't even done with their training program when they took me and the other 15 people that were training with me into a room and said, "We don't need you anymore." So security escorted all of us at once to the door. I had a guy who worked for me who was awesome at his job but believed in just about every conspiracy imaginable. He would go on vacation and people would ask where he was going and he'd say, "Nowhere. I just need more time to work with my magnets." He'd forward all kinds of stuff about big business suppressing technology, crappy internet videos of people who claimed they had built perpetual motion machines, and other things. Sometimes we'd try to point out the flaws in these theories, but mostly we just laughed it off. One morning I came into work and started unpacking my laptop to get started, and he burst into my office with a huge smile and said, "I'm giving ya my 2-week notice." I started to speak and he cut me off. "I double-checked everything last night and I've achieved over-unity. I just needed a different kind of magnet. That was my key. I'm out of here in 2 weeks. I wanted to resign right away, but my girlfriend said that the polite thing to do was give 2 weeks notice. I guess the world can wait another 2 weeks. I tried to talk him down, but he was insistent. Over the next 2 weeks, he continued to work diligently on his remaining tasks, but he had a perpetual smile on his face and declared loudly to anyone who asked that, "I've solved the world's energy problems," and that, "This is a revolutionary game changer." Someone joked that something this radical might put his life in danger, and he responded, "I've taken steps to ensure that if anything happens to me, my invention will still get out to the general public." His last day was almost identical to anyone else's last day at the company they resigned from, only he acted like the happiest person in existence. 3 months later, I got an email from him that was entirely in lowercase letters and looked like it was written by a completely different person. It was something like, "Hi, I was wondering if my position had been filled. If not, I was wondering if I could have it back. There is something wrong with my device. I think it's the magnets, and I don't have enough money right now to fix it. I need a job, thanks." His position had been filled. I tried going through finance to get another position opened, because all crazy aside, he was good at this job. But the vice president of development shot it down when it came to him in the approval chain, because he didn't want employees to think they could leave and still have a job to come back to whenever they wanted. This was at a restaurant. The general manager of the place was fired for being a scumbag, pervert, moron. After he was escorted to his car, he drove back to the front of the restaurant, got out, ran to the grassy area and started pulling up handfuls of grass and throwing them at the windows, whilst screaming like a burnt child. I used to manage the tech support side of a call center for an ISP. I had one tech come in and put a 6-pack of beer on my desk and said, "That's that," and walk out crying. Crying? I usually only do that on my way into work. I do it at work, for efficiency's sake. My supervisor used to tell everyone at my last job they were easily replaceable. He was a former military guy and he tried to run the place military style. He'd threaten people, break stuff, and make unreasonable demands. So one day I found a new job and just quit without notice. He got a hold of my number and the next day he called me and yelled at me for being unprofessional. He said I owed him 2 weeks. I told him I'm easily replaceable and he should have no problem finding a replacement, and then I hung up. I should also mention that job had the bare minimum amount of employees to run the place. If someone called out, we'd all have to work at least 2 hours overtime to make up for it. If anyone took a week vacation, it was a nightmare. My quitting like that set the place back a few months until they hired and trained a new guy to replace me. Yeah, there's a difference between a rifle grunt and a specialist. I'm guessing the supervisor was probably in the front-line infantry to have gotten that idea. It's a long story, but our manager wrote up me, my friend, and literally everyone else who had worked that day because she thought someone stole $20 from her. My friend and I decided to quit because I'm not going to sign a write-up when I did nothing wrong and she's too stupid to lock her stuff up. I took the paper, simply wrote "I quit" and handed it back to her. I looked at my friend and he looks right at her, just staring at her. Then he slowly crumples up the write-up, puts it in his mouth and starts chewing, just staring at her. He turns around, walks to his car and drives away, still the whole time with the paper in his mouth. It was glorious. I had a friend who worked as a night baker. One night they wrote him up for being disorderly. They were sitting down at one of the tables in the dining area and they slide him the paper. He threw the paper in the air and shouted, "Nope," and then just went back to baking. They didn't fire him and he didn't quit. I don't know how he got away with it. I ran away after quitting. I was hired by a competing company, put in my 2 weeks and the boss got suspicious. He came by my desk and told me to follow him into his office to sign a non-competition form, basically saying that after I left there I couldn't work for the competition for 6 months. I was crapping my pants as I got up to follow him. At that exact moment, the phone rang. I picked it up and told him I'd be there in 5 minutes. I finished up the phone call, grabbed my stuff and hauled it out the back door. They eventually did find out that I went to work for the competition and sent me an email saying, "Congrats on the new job. I'll have to stop by for a visit one of these days." Why would anyone sign something like that? If they didn't make you do it when you were hired, why would you do it when you're about to quit? What are they going to do? Fire you? After you've quit? I don't understand the scenario at all. I worked my way up from someone with no responsibility to running a department. Along the way, no one thought to make me sign one. The main reason I went looking for a new job was because they were doing mass layoffs. After they tried to fire my buddy, they asked him to sign one, which he then informed them was illegal and told them to go F themselves. This happened at the casino my friend worked at. She's standing there dealing blackjack, normal day. All of a sudden, the dealer on the next table over screams, "Blackjack! I win!" while dancing and pumping both fists into the air. His players are dumbfounded. After his victory dance, he reaches out with both hands and scoops up everything on the table. Everything. Yeah, that too. If it was on the table, it got scooped up into his bank. Cards, chips, lighters, all of the money the players had sitting on the table in front of them, even the money that wasn't being wagered. After he scoops it all up, he rips off his ID badge, throws it down on top of the pile and walks off the table, out of the pit, and out the front doors to where his friend was in the car waiting. It took surveillance hours and hours to find out whose money belonged to whom. After the fact, she found out that the guy's friend had been waiting out there since the beginning of his shift. It had taken him hours to deal himself a blackjack. In short, casino employees like to go down in flames. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Worked at a very fancy French restaurant. The chef was a master chef, and thus he had the biggest ego of anyone I'd ever met. Chef was in the piano bar talking and having a drink with some horse racing bigwigs, Rancho Santa Fe during track season. Hard-working, mild-mannered busser is changing tablecloths. The chef just starts belittling him in front of everyone for a laugh. "What the hell, man? I just saw a bit of the table when you switched cloths." You're not supposed to see the actual table. "If you grabbed the wrong size tablecloth, fold it back up. Man, you're so damn lazy." There are a lot of different sizes, so you grab a variety and use it on the next table if it was wrong. The chef said something else and laughs with a jockey, some hot women, and some guys with back pockets thicker than George Costanza. I forget what he said that made everyone laugh, but this 20-year-old behemoth of a busser takes his apron off and throws it at the chef. The chef stands up from the booth like he's teed off and is yelling about how he'll lose his job. The busser goes, "Frick this job and frick you little turd," and decks the chef right in the chops in the middle of the busy piano bar, then walks to the back exit, grabs a tray full of buffed Rydell stemware, and chucks it into the wall and leaves. It was pretty rad. A terrible ex-coworker, Crazy K, told everyone except his boss that it was his last day. His boss, a real nice guy, eventually heard what was going on and walked over to him and asked if it were true. Crazy K simply said, "Yep," and stood up and walked out. This guy had serious white snow problems. Not sure where he is now, but I kinda miss the shenanigans, and I hope he's found help. Other stories include continually complaining about being underpaid. He was making 6 figures, which is above average for the position and skill level experience. To illustrate his poorness, he would loudly count coins at his desk by dumping handfuls onto it and sliding them one by one into his hand. This was performed multiple times daily. It was the best for the company, but Crazy K was my primary source of entertainment at work. He would bring girlfriends, very trashy-looking working girls, to our upscale holiday parties. He got 2 of them pregnant, proposed to both, they each took the ring and ran off to southern states and sued him for child support. One of the previously mentioned working ladies at a holiday party was named LaFonda. Yes, seriously. This was about 2 years after Napoleon Dynamite came out and everyone was laughing about it. On a whim, he bought 2 brand new cars in a week, but had to sell them both about a month later. He picked up another lady of the night at a work event using Craigslist on his BlackBerry. Was quite proud of this. I mean, I've had this kind of coworker without the overt wealth. They're very entertaining, if nothing else. I'd planned to quit a job once, and it just didn't take. I picked up a 3rd job at a cafe during undergrad that required me to be in at 6:30 a.m. I thought I could do it. I gave it a try for a few weeks, but it was quickly becoming apparent that I liked drinking and sleeping in on Saturday a whole lot more than the extra cash. Anyway, I woke up hungover in a beautiful girl's bed and decided, screw it, I'm not going in, and went back to bed. I know, I should have called, but I was 20 and working 2 other jobs in addition to taking courses full-time. When I woke up again at around 9, I had a couple of voicemails. I expect "don't bother coming in again, we'll make your last check" message, but instead it's the owners apologizing because my coworker had been attacked and mugged on their way to work, and they figured I must have shown up already, seen the closed cafe and just gone home. I didn't have the heart to tell them, so I went in the next day, worked, and gave notice. 2 managers, one who looked like Ross Perot and the other who looked like John Candy, were leading a meeting when the police came in and arrested them. Turns out they took a trip together to the next town over and beat a working girl nearly to death. Worked in a supermarket as a cashier when I was in high school. A few of my good chums also worked there as well. Cue the crazy lady who goes to my friend who's having a rough day to begin with at the register behind me. Puts all of her crap up and he brings her up. She notices a lobster has somehow gone missing and accuses my friend of stealing it. Then he says, "Lady, are you kidding me? Why would I take a lobster?" She then proceeded to yell at him and demands compensation in some form. He's had enough and yells, "F this crap, I'm out. Lady, F you and your lobster." He proceeded to walk out of the store and punches a hole in the wall, knocking a display shelf over as he exits, with her wide-eyed and a silent store behind him. Turns out her lobster was left at the seafood counter. I had to fire an employee after I caught her sleeping in her cubicle multiple times, and then telling me that asking her to assist in other areas when we were slow was not her job. Her mum came in afterwards and came storming into my office in a huff. Picture this: a 40-year-old black woman in pretty good shape in skin-tight leopard leggings with gigantic gold high heels on, oversized sunglasses and cornrows in her hair, screaming at me, "You're just a fricking racist. I'm gonna send my lawyer at you and he's going to sue your butt. We got racial discrimination suit on our hands." I looked at her the whole time and never said a fricking word. After which she stormed out of the building screaming, "You're all a bunch of fricking racist N-words in here." My first job out of college was at a medium-sized company with a small IT staff. There were just 6 of us programmers until we hired the new guy. We were using this obscure language which you couldn't really hire for without paying through the nose, so they decided to do on-the-job training for this. So the new guy was a little older than me but had no experience outside of teaching. He was nice, sort of quiet and a bit quirky. The only personal thing he kept on his desk was this plastic goat. I didn't have anything on my personal desk either, so I didn't really think anything of it. Sometimes he would play with it a little, but it mostly just sat on one spot in his desk. Everyone needs some sort of stress relief, I suppose. A few weeks go by and the new guy seems to be picking up the language, fair enough. He had coded a couple of screens, albeit with a little help. One Monday comes up and he doesn't show at the office. Our boss calls him and says you can't just not show up without calling. Not a big deal to me, I mean things come up, it was just a little unprofessional. The next morning I get into the office super early, which is unlike me since I'm such a late riser. He rolls in around his normal time and is surprised to see me, but I figure it's because he likes the quiet morning. We're there working for a couple of hours and the whole time he's fiddling with the goat in his hand. Mid-morning he gets up out of his chair and leaves our little room. An hour goes by and I figure out he isn't around for lunch, which we all used to do as a group. I figure he must have had something to do. Well, he doesn't show up after lunch. The next day, no call, no show. A weekend passes and still he doesn't show and he hadn't returned any calls. So my boss had to call the police to do a health check on him. He literally sends an email saying he wouldn't be back. We all look at each other thinking, who in the world quits like that? Was this a spur of the moment or premeditated thing? We look at his desk and realize his little plastic goat is gone. He must have come in that morning to grab it, but was surprised by me into staying for a bit to cover it up or something. He hadn't done anything malicious to the code, he just wanted his goat. A guy I knew got an email for a meeting in the boss's office. Figuring he was screwed, he starts just destroying computer equipment, just messing stuff up like crazy. So he goes into the office, sits down, and the boss tells him he needs to go to a conference someplace, and it'd be all paid for by the company. He didn't get to go to the conference. My previous company was so awful that we'd get new employees sometimes that would get the vibe very quickly and quit within the first few days. But the classic was the guy who never came back from his lunch break on the first day. Within his group in our company, his name, Greg, became a verb meaning to quit at lunch and never come back. So occasionally you'd hear a frustrated employee saying, "That's it, I'm doing a Greg." I wonder if my name is used for its infamy to imply any activity in a circle I'm unaware of. I just kind of love that Greg probably has no idea that he left such a legacy in a workplace he didn't even spend a full day in. I have 2 stories, one normal and the other not so normal. The first was a bus guy at Red Lobster that had had enough on a Friday night. He was in the middle of cleaning a table. Nobody was talking to him, nobody was yelling, and nobody had had any confrontation with him all night. Suddenly, he stood up and yelled, "F this place," took off his apron, threw it across the room, and walked out the door. Never saw him again. The weird one was a guy at a place I worked where we had unlimited internet access. A lot of people would Facebook or whatever. Turns out this guy was trolling chat rooms for underage girls. He left for lunch to meet one at a mall, and it wasn't a young girl, but a bunch of cops. They took him and then came and took the computer he worked on. My ex-girlfriend used to be a pizza delivery driver for the chain pizzeria. One day her boss was giving her guff and she said she quit. The manager said she needed to bring her uniform in. She promptly took off her shirt, threw it at him, she was wearing underclothes, and then walked out, through a restaurant full of families and customers. I worked at a bowling alley and me and another guy did all the legwork for the bar, bringing out the food, collecting bear cups, delivering the beer, among other things. The old lady bartender never split a dime with us. She hoarded all of the tips despite only filling the cups. We didn't like it, so I mentioned it to the manager girl on duty. She wasn't a very good manager and couldn't handle situations. Her big solution was, "If you don't like it, take off your shirt." So without really batting an eye, I took off my shirt, put it on the table, and walked out. A few days later, the person above her called me in to apologize, give me my last paycheck, and offered to let me stick around. I didn't, but as a nice consolation, I learned they started paying the other guy doing the same work a little extra, and he started making a portion of the tips. Screw that greedy old banshee, though. After 25 years as an executive with a fairly large corporation, I threw the keys to my company car and my company credit card on the CEO's desk and walked home. Started my own business 4 months later and just retired after 19 successful and blissful years. My friend quit his job at a corner store by just walking out and never coming back. Before he left, he stashed an open gallon of milk on top of the radiator that hung from the ceiling. What are the strangest things you've overheard while chauffeuring the rich? Billy Bob Thornton was doing radio press for a movie about to come out, meaning he had to stop by 6 or 7 radio stations for interviews. He wanted to have a cigarette in the vehicle on the way to the next interview, but I had to let him know that our company has a no-smoking policy in our vehicles. He asked me to call the owner to make an exception, but the owner said no, and it's a $250 cleaning fee if he smoked in the vehicle. He asked to stop by a bank. Came out and handed me $5,000 in cash and said, "Here's for the whole goddamn pack." He smoked in the car for the rest of the trip. Later, I got up the nerve to ask him if that's the most expensive pack of cigarettes he'd ever smoked. All he said was, "Not even close." Never explained it further. I think about him often. Picked up a wedding party. Bride, bridesmaid, and bride's boyfriend who was paying for the wedding. They had a magnum of champagne and we drove around for quite some time while they snorted white snow in the back. They were using rolled-up 50s and 20s, then tossing them to me in the front seat as tip money. I dutifully brushed off each bill and added them to my wallet, pretending not to know what was going on. The couple argued off and on about showing up to the wedding. Apparently, she felt weird about getting married and he was trying to convince her it was a good idea. Finally dropped them off at the church and he slipped me a matchbook with his name and number written on it. Yeah, it was the late 80s and I was a young woman, one of the only female limo drivers at the time in that city. I scored a sweet leather jacket with the tips from that night. So many weird stories. And to clarify, the bride's boyfriend and the groom were not the same person. A chauffeur I knew ended up driving around some big stars. He was a big guy, like 6'8" and super muscular. His best story was when he was driving around a few WWE, or WWF back then, stars, and they awkwardly asked him not to get out and open the door for them because he'd make them look smaller. I'd totally believe this. The WWE had an on-air personality named Tom Phillips that was like 6 foot. In order to make the wrestlers seem bigger when he was interviewing them, they always had him sitting down, or if they were standing, they were framed from the waist up to hide the fact that Tom was standing with his feet spread out. And this is why the narrator only goes out to the clubs with a squad of short kings. I'm going to digress slightly from the topic to bring up another story that was written to us, not about people in limos, but their close cousins, people who go to country clubs. I once worked at a really exclusive club in Massachusetts, the kind you have to be born into or have generational wealth to be voted into membership by the board. Drew Barrymore was a frequent guest, and there was always a lot of tension between her and her ex, who always came with his extremely young new girlfriend and wife. She wasn't super friendly, no one was supposed to acknowledge they recognized her, and seemed constantly stressed. I felt kind of bad for her. Didn't seem like a fun life. Mitt Romney, Morgan Freeman, and a bunch of big-time athletes were also frequent guests. Someone got married at our club and spent over $2 million on the wedding. They flew out the event planners for Coachella to design every aspect of the wedding. It was a spectacular one and one of the most fun nights I've ever had. However, at the end of the night, the front desk saw the groom go home with one of the bridesmaids instead of the bride. I helped set up and cater this one member's garden party, a casual affair for them that must have cost tens of thousands. They had a well-known music group come play for their guests, and I got to play cornhole with said group during the luncheon, which was pretty cool. So many wealthy kids with rich kid problems and wildly different upbringings. Parents would constantly talk and quiz their kids on politics, history, science, among other things. One group of guys was challenging their teenage sons to come up with a business idea. The boy with the best idea would receive $1 million for startup costs. Kids talked stocks constantly at the dinner table. Teenagers would come to eat with their friends, drink, and drop a casual $15,000 bill on their parents' tab. Just such a stark contrast from the way I was raised, where money was a taboo topic and my weekly $2 allowance for a week's worth of chores made me feel rich. It was a small island with an equally small nightlife, so for fun we'd grab a drink and an ice cream cone and hop on the yachts and sailboats parked at the docks. We'd just explore and pretend we were sailors or captains for the night. Once we hopped on Johnny Depp's super yacht while he was out for dinner. We actually managed to hang out for a hot minute before security finally kicked us off. While out looking for a tennis partner, I met this truly lovely couple who basically adopted me. I would bike to their house to play matches on their backyard tennis court every day. They loved to take me out to eat at these incredible restaurants. As a foodie, I was in heaven. They let me drive their cars on the beach, use their surfboards, drive their jet ski. I ran out of gas in the middle of the ocean and I had to get rescued by the Coast Guard. And they took me out on their yacht and even flew me out on their private jet to nearby islands to explore in the morning, and then would fly me back in time for my job at the club. They were the most kind and wonderful people and never asked for anything but my company in return. I think they missed their daughters, who both lived out of state. I fell out of touch with them, but I think of them often and I hope they're doing well. A friend of mine worked for an upscale concierge chauffeur service. His most memorable moment came when he lost Marie Osmond. Fairly simple gig, go to the airport and pick up Marie Osmond, who was to be the featured entertainer at a private event. The plane comes in, he meets her, and she has a carry-on bag, but her checked suitcase containing her stage dresses and makeup was missing. She was unflappable though, asks to be taken to the nearest upscale mall. He does as instructed. She goes into a large upscale department store, selects 2 long sequined cocktail dresses, and goes to the fitting room to try them out, without him of course. Unfortunately, there are 2 entrances and exits to the fitting room, and Marie Osmond exits out through the other side and can't find my chauffeur buddy, who is waiting patiently on the side she'd entered. 20 minutes passes. He thinks something has gone wrong, so he grabs a female manager and asks her to go into the fitting rooms and ask for Marie Osmond. The manager thinks she's being pranked and declines. Chauffeur buddy is in mini panic mode, running wildly around the store, asking random customers, "Have you seen Marie Osmond? Have you seen Marie Osmond?" Store security is summoned and he's asked to leave the premises right now. He calls his employer and tells him he has lost Marie Osmond. The employer doesn't have her cell phone number but has her agent's number and he is not accepting calls. She, in the meantime, has taken a cab to the gig, thinking she's been forgotten. Lots of apologies eventually ensued and there were no repercussions. When we were in high school, my friend used to caddy at a local country club. One guy really liked him and asked if he'd be willing to drive him around while he went out partying. This was like 2003 and in a pretty rural area. My friend agreed. He picked the guy up at like 8 p.m. Right off the bat, the guy handed him $200. He went to a bar for a little bit and my friend sat in the car. The guy came out, handed him like another $200 and told him he had to visit his friend real quick. He went and got a bunch of white snow. They went to another bar, he handed my friend another $100 and told him to look out the window and turn up the radio. He then blew several lines. He came out a couple of hours later with a girl. He was married with kids, by the way, and handed my friend another $200 and they went back to her house. After they'd done the deed, he came out and asked to be taken to the beach. At this point, it was like 2 or 3 a.m. My friend said the guy slowly walked around the beach, went into the water up to his ankles, in his shoes, and threw a bunch of rocks into the water and then sat in the sand for about 45 minutes. He came back to the car and asked to be driven home. When they got out of the car, he hugged my friend and gave him $500 and asked him to never tell anyone what happened. None of us really believed my friend when this happened until the guy he drove got arrested for a violent outburst and possession of white snow about 6 months later. You know, as weird and haunting as this event was, $1,300 for a day's work is something that I would literally have brought a new car in order to do when I was in university. A buddy of mine ended up picking up a Netflix producer while doing Uber. He said they had a great conversation as he brought him to his hotel. The producer invited him up for a drink, and since my friend was a film student, he thought it'd be a good idea to try and get some good networking in. They hung out for about an hour when he asked my friend if he knew of any massage places with happy endings. He didn't, but the guy paid him $500 to bring him to the closest massage place, which was only a few miles out. Upon dropping him off, he gave my buddy a card and said, "There's a big party and festival I'm hosting. That's your ticket in. I'll let you know if I get that happy ending." He got that happy ending. Not a chauffeur, but this happened because of a lack of one. Basically, a guy I used to know back when we were teenagers, 17 years old, had a lot of money. We just never knew how much until I was invited to go on holiday with him and some other friends. All expenses paid, of course. Anyway, we took a taxi to an area where this guy wanted to buy an apartment and wanted to show us, so we went with him and ended up spending the whole day walking around the area. We got tired and eventually wanted to go back to the house, but we were so far away that walking was not an option unless we wanted to walk for about 3 hours. Neither of us had enough cash to pay for a taxi, and back then taxis didn't accept cards. This was around 2000 or 2001. So this guy rings his dad and asks if he could send a chauffeur to pick us up, but the chauffeur turns out was busy doing some deliveries for the dad. So the dad instead says, There's a Mercedes-Benz dealer shop near where you are. I know the manager there as I've brought several cars from them. Just go and buy a car with the credit card. You can leave it in the house and we'll figure out how to bring it home later." So we went to this dealer shop and somehow in about 30 minutes the manager did all the paperwork and we ended up driving back to the house in a brand new Mercedes C-Class, which we used for the rest of the holiday. Mine isn't something that was overheard, but something that happened. At least I hope nobody could hear it. A friend of mine who worked in music was in a limo with Robin Thicke and a load of dancers and models driving around London. We're all just chatting, and out of nowhere, Robin Thicke just starts going south of the border on one of the models. There was an awkward split-second silence, and then everyone just carried on and ignored it. Holy crap, I have a Robin Thicke story too. One of the administrative assistants at my work went to Vegas and met Robin Thicke there. He asked her at the bar if she wanted to come back to his room. When she said sure, he whipped out an NDA to have her sign. The guy cheated on his wife so much that he had paperwork drawn up so women couldn't tell on him. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to drive limousine and taxi. One time I got the manager of a fairly famous Canadian band in my car asking me where to buy white snow. I had no idea where and I told him that, so his bright idea was to find a working girl, hire her and ask her. I told him I couldn't help him pick up working girls either. He was disappointed but understood. He had me drive down a well-known street until he saw a working girl. He asked me to pull over, got out of the taxi, paid the fare, and then immediately flagged me down as a new ride. I knew what was up, but whatever. He gets back into the car with the working girl and she tells him what house to go to for some white snow. I take them there and wait a bit. They come back out and I drive him back to the venue. Then he offers me 2 free tickets to the show, which I gladly accepted as I loved that band and I'd seen them 3 times. Alas, I was still working during the show. I gave them away to 2 friends who had never seen the band. They had a good time and I had a fun story to share with them about how I scored those tickets. Not really a shocking conversation and hardly a famous person, but it was interesting how easily and full of trust people can be about searching out and buying substances in a strange city. For the record, this was 2003. My dad was a chauffeur back when I was younger, and he told me a story of driving the director of a company down the road with the Blackpool illuminations in the company limousine. The director was standing up out of the sunroof with his arms out, waving at people as he drove past. What the people on the street didn't know is that in the back of the limo there were 2 working girls going to town on his eggplant. Out of all the answers, this is the one that made me go, aye, that sounds about right. Frickin' Blackpool. I have multiple people pay me handsomely to let them smoke green herb in the car. Heard a French guy yelling at his wife that $10,000 was too much to pay for 2 bracelets that she brought. Also overheard a lot of business deals with absurd amounts of money referenced, like tens of millions. I've had conversations at work where I've said just buy 2 of the gosh darn things, it's only $25K. Kinda crazy to go from that to debating if I want to keep my HBO subscription that night. My sister was in a limo once and asked the driver about his most interesting ride. The driver said that he'd picked up some models who were going to a PETA demonstration. I'd rather be bare than in fur, or whatever it was. He got to the location, they stripped down in the back of the limo, and he waited until they were done with the photo op. You know, I guess if you're going to go and bare it all for the public and be photographed to boot, why not get trashed in a luxury stretch before you get there? Drove limo at Marquette University during undergrad and grad school. Some of the students that went there were obscenely wealthy. Limos are the vans that drive drunk students anywhere on campus and a few blocks outside of campus. A couple of things I remember randomly from it. 1, a drunk guy leaving his wallet on a van and another driver calling it so me and another supervisor could take it to campus police. We picked up the wallet from the driver and opened it to get the student ID so they know who to email. There had to be a few grand in there, and when we called the kid to tell him about it, he told us we could just keep it because it was too far from his dorm to bother picking it up. Okay. 2, I picked up a couple of girls from AITA and they spent the entire ride talking about how it was ridiculous that one of the girls' parents planned on making her pay for her own apartment after graduation, and there was nothing even livable under $2,000 a month. The school is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 3, Mardi Gras is the name of a campus ministry trip where you use your spring break to build houses and drink in somewhere that doesn't get snow in April. One of the people on my van was getting a free night of drinks from his buddies because he paid for everyone's trips. I think it was like $1,500 per person if I recall correctly. 4, it's a free service and a frat star tried to pay me for the ride with a Ziploc baggie of white snow. I said no, and he called me a legend and left $20 in the cup holder before I realized it. 5. Rich kids are rich, but foreign rich kids are usually on a different level. Was talking to a guy from Spain who said his dad did something with movies over there, I don't know. He had an actual Rolex on and ended the conversation with, "So anyways, do you know where to find any crystal?" Rich foreign kids are crazy. I had a Russian friend and I'd always just generally assumed he was at our university in Scotland on some kind of scholarship. He seemed to only own one set of clothes, was the top of the math program, and drank a lot of vodka. He did once try to sell me a submarine when he was drunk, but that happens to the best of us. He seemed to fit in until his dad showed up and they flew to Paris for lunch. This is not a limo story, but this thread reminded me of a rich guy story. My daughter played soccer for many years, and at one practice, a guy drove up in a Ferrari, got out and started talking to another of the dads on the team. After a few minutes, the guy left and another of the dads went over there and asked him who that guy was. He replied that the guy was his lawyer or something. I came to find out years later that the guy in the Ferrari was a multimillionaire and had one and only one client, that dad, and his only job was to handle the dad's charitable donations. So this guy got filthy rich donating millions of dollars of someone else's money and taking a percentage off the top. The dad, who was apparently worth several $100 million, never came across as rich at all. He wore sweats to and was at every practice and game. He drove a Camry. He had been married to his average-looking wife for 25 years, stuff like that. Acted like a normal guy like the rest of us. One of my best friends used to drive Uber in a wealthy area of LA. He told me so many stories about drunk celebs and TikTokers in his car. Someone offered him a bag of green herb because they felt sorry for their friend throwing up in the back seat. Most people were just normal though. Some highlights: Quentin Tarantino and Trisha Paytas were baking out in his back seat when they were secretly dating. Mike Tyson is apparently very nice in person and also a giant pothead. Somebody on Gossip Girl and her friend were arguing about chicken nuggets and tried to get him to go through a Wendy's drive-thru during the lunch rush when there were already 10 cars in line. Addison Rae and one of her friends took their shoes off and left them in the car. Leo DiCaprio took more than 5 minutes to find the car. He seemed out of it and was quietly bobbing his head listening to music on his headphones. I had the distinguished privilege of working with a multimillionaire one time for a couple of days, and I was just astounded at how out of touch he was with people. One conversation, he was talking about how he hated all of the new homes they were building and liked old castles, so he was having a castle in Scotland disassembled and reassembled here in the US piece by piece. On another occasion, he asked me why I wasn't in college yet. The job was after high school and I was working as a plumber. And he gave an "oh, right," when I told him I couldn't afford to go yet and had to save up. About 25 years ago, I had a summer job at a very Tony country club. 6-figure joining fee, 5-figure continuing membership dues, and that got you nothing but the privilege of paying top dollar for rounds, food, and the other services. I was a porter some of the time as we had cottages on club grounds for members to stay and make a weekend out of it. One of my duties was driving members to and from airports, usually private airports for private jets. One time I'm driving 2 guys to the airport and one of them starts complaining. Seems he and his wife are always fighting over who gets the jet every weekend and where they want to go. Well, the other one replied, "My 3rd jet is actually just gathering dust right now since my son went to college. Take it off my hands?" They shook on it right there in the van. Very relatable. None of us know what to do with our extra jets once we've paid for a new building at Harvard to get our kid in there and he finally leaves. Good sweet Lord, can we please eat the rich yet? A small part of my family was Chicago Mafia. Grandpa told me a story of a family wedding in Chicago they went to in the late 60s. They were picked up at the airport by a limo with some high-ranking family members. On the way to the hotel, they were stopped about 8 times by various police officers. The officer would walk up to the driver's window. The chauffeur would reach into a money bag and pass a bill to the officer. Nothing would be said and they'd take off again. Eventually, my grandpa asked if they were being bribed. His cousin, the one in the mafia, laughed and said, "No, it's Thursday. That's when we pay our boys." So I guess that's how they did it. A traffic stop and in the open where it's not expected. So I'd imagine that chauffeur had seen some things. I used to caddy at a fairly exclusive country club in Massachusetts. It's the kind of place where no matter how rich you are, you can't buy a membership. You're either born into it or you marry a member. As a result, a lot of the members like to show off their influence by inviting guests who'd otherwise be unable to play at the club. Someone invited Mitt Romney. We were given a heads up that the governor, he wasn't a senator yet, would be coming and they wanted us to know how to act around him. We were told he wanted to be treated like anyone else, but they didn't want us to gawk. So I guess to make sure us dumb caddies weren't gawking, we were instructed to not look at or acknowledge the governor. Because this is precisely how we'd treat other people. I did get to shake his hand and chat a little bit. He was friendly, personable, way nicer than a lot of the members. I still don't like a lot of his politics, but he seemed nice enough in person. I was driving an Uber and I picked up two businessmen in an industrial park. They were building developers. The man who was clearly the boss spoke to me as if I were a man, and I was always the driver who picked him up. Although they were clearly from the Middle East, they chose to speak English. Maybe they thought it was rude not to, being in the US, but if that would have been rude, I'm not sure what the rest of the conversation was. They spoke about the future of business as if it were all so futile, and how everyone will be either very wealthy like them or very poor, and how their children really won't be able to get jobs either, but they also won't need to. I logged more than 4,000 rides between 2015 and 2017, and that was one of the weirdest. The other weirdest guy I picked up from a dispensary. He was a really good-looking, very well-dressed and clearly well-to-do guy, but he was in some sort of mental distress. He wanted to visit more dispensaries but had clearly already bought the max. I got his hotel information through conversation and went there instead. On the way, he told me, in all seriousness, all about how his father was God, which meant he was Jesus. Didn't you notice how much brighter the sun became when I got in your car? He was serious. He also followed Guns N' Roses like they were the Grateful Dead. He thought Axl Rose was the smartest man alive. He didn't really notice when we got to his hotel instead of the dispensary. I did ask him if he had taken any other substances that day, and he insisted he hadn't. That was also one of the weirdest. Managers. What small things immediately make you not hire a person, and why? I just look for honesty and some self-respect. The roles I hire for are fairly entry-level, so you don't need to be amazingly qualified or anything. I get a lot of young people for interviews, and what annoys me the most is when they arrive dressed in casual clothes. I don't disregard their application over clothes, but I do sit and wonder why their friends or parents or partners let them come to an interview in such sloppy clothing. That said, I did have a weird one. I hired a guy from a group-like session, as he was probably the best and most confident person on the day. After hiring, a few weeks in, he starts to become unreliable with his late finishes. When I ask him what's up with that, he comes in one day, on his day off, and says he needs to speak to me. He then tells me that he'll be resigning because he can't make the later working hours, and that he's sorry for letting me down and appreciates us giving him a chance. He then lifts his jean leg and shows me an electronic tag on his ankle. Turns out he was released from prison 2 days before my interview, and said he never brought it up because in a room full of people, why would anyone employ the ex-con? When I thought about it, he's probably right. Me and my colleague who were interviewing probably would have influenced our decision on him if we knew, and he said he just wanted a fair chance. So the tag prevented him from being outside his home after 7 p.m. as he was charged for supply when younger. I ended up calling the parole officer and the HMRC and eventually altering his curfew on the basis that I said he would have to be jobless if they didn't, and if you don't allow him to have a legitimate job, what are the chances of him re-offending going to be? He ended up being one of the best employees for a while. We were looking for engineers and we had this guy apply. He had a pretty sizable amount of experience to the job despite being a fresh graduate and had experiences and training in other fields related to the production industry. I asked him what position he was applying for and offered him the assistant production engineer based on his credentials alone. He looked at me with a disgusted face like I'd just insulted him. I asked him what was wrong and he replied, "Nothing really, it seems like a pretty good position, but I want something better because I can clearly see you're impressed by my resume." I took the bait and partly also due to our immediate need for engineers, asked him what his preferred position would be. He immediately answered that he wanted a supervisory position, like the general production manager. I asked him why he wanted such a position. His reply? "Seems like one of those jobs where I can sit in the office and play games on my phone all day without having to actually do anything." I quickly gave an excuse to end the interview right there and just told him we would call him. We didn't. Moral of the story? Never tell your potential employer you just want to sit on your butt all day and do nothing. I learned so much in some of these videos. Now I know that I shouldn't have said that in every interview in the past 5 years. You'll get there eventually, narrator. For phone and Skype interviews, don't Google every question I ask you to get the right answer. It's a dead giveaway when after every question there's 10 seconds of umming and then a textbook answer. You'd be surprised at how often this happens. I did a lot of phone interviewing of programmer candidates at my last job. There's nothing like hearing the tickety-tack of a keyboard after each question, like, "Holy crap, dude, get a quiet keyboard if you're gonna do that crap." The most fun is hearing other voices whispering in the background. I guess it at least shows the candidate is all about teamwork. When the interviewee ignores the person who asks the question and instead talks to the person they think has the most power in the room. This has happened in entry-level positions, but I also helped interview for a position that would be working at my same level as a partner. My manager told me the decision was ultimately up to me, because I knew what I was willing to work with and what was needed for the role. I had a man come in and he wouldn't look at me, didn't shake my hand, and every time I asked a question, he looked at my manager for approval. Yeah, hard pass. I don't want to work with a guy who has no respect for me. Being blazed. Don't smoke green herb before interviews. It doesn't relax you, you just look and sound weird. Talking about your broccoli and chocolate diet to improve your telekinesis. This happened to me about 15 years ago. Showing up late for an interview already puts you in the hole. Not addressing it or apologizing for it will make it complete. Turn a negative into a positive and show you have accountability. Not addressing it shows that you don't have respect for me and my time. I don't care if you're a little late if you're apologetic and seem embarrassed or regretful when you turn up. That shows me that even though you've met a challenge and made an error, you can be humble about it, apologize, and move forward. People that showed up to an interview in dirty sweatpants and a hoodie or whatever and had no idea what the position really was. As a pharmacy or tech assistant. It happened more than once. Oh, and one guy basically said this. I don't know, the pay would be nice, I guess. Same guy, different gem. When I asked why he had had 7 jobs in the past 2 years, he was like, all of those guys were buttholes, man. 1. Check your grammar and punctuation over and over. Correspondence via emails should be professional too. It's not a time to use shorthand like you'd send around in text messages to friends. Bad grammar in emails usually catches my attention right away in a negative way. There was a young woman interviewing for a position with me who was very creative and extremely qualified. However, her written correspondence was so poor with me that I knew she'd do the same thing with external clients, and she didn't get the position because of this. 2. I'll usually hire someone who's coachable and has a great attitude over someone who might have more experience but doesn't get along with others. One's attitude is really a game changer, and I'm more prone to hire those with a positive outlook on life. 3. If you want an in with the company, don't always go straight to the top. Maybe reach out to a lower-level employee and learn from them and get tips. I always take a look at candidates referred to me by internal employees, no matter how high they rank in the company. 4. Be genuine and authentic. I love candidates who straight up tell me, look, the last few years have been really hard for me. I jumped around jobs and looking back, I realize I could have stuck them out a bit longer. But I learned from the experience and I want to do better. We're humans too. We get that life can be tough, so I appreciate people who are real and authentic. 5. And lastly, don't be an excuse maker and go on and on about issues. This makes me think you'll do the same in our corporation. During the interview process, be open and authentic, yet to the point and matter of fact. I believe every question can and should be answered in 30 seconds or less. I'm reading this thread as a hiring manager for a more or less janitorial position, and we're so badly hurting for employees at that spot that we'll pretty much hire anyone that applies so long as they clear the background check and the substance screening. Raggedy clothes? You're hired. Don't really have the greatest answers to questions? You're hired. Can't really explain or give a reason for the stuff on the application? You're hired. You physically showed up to the interview? Hired. It's crazy that the people that interview the best, show up dressed as well as they can be in their means, and clearly want any job, are more often than not the ones that get shot down because of background. It sucks that the ones getting hired over them quit 2 weeks in because they don't like cleaning things up. Be me, the hiring manager. The first thing I do when I get a stack of applications is throw half of them in the trash. I don't want any unlucky people working here. I mean, you'd hope that they'd actually comb through resumes for relevant qualifications at a certain tier of work, but then again, I'm absolutely certain this happens regularly for entry-level jobs. The biggest one for me was always whether they were responding thoughtfully and specifically to prompts or just using vague interviewee language. If they answer even one question in a condescending tone, it's not a good sign. Everyone will hate them and you for hiring them. If they show bad attitude in an interview, wait till they've been on the job a few months. It tripped me out when I started doing interviewing and hiring for the first time. I had no idea how weird and rude people could be when applying for a job. It gave me a lot more confidence going forward when applying for jobs myself when I realized just being able to string coherent sentences together on my resume and being a normal, friendly human being in person was putting me ahead of the pack. If you put it on your resume, I'm going to ask you about it, so don't add filler. How do you feel about someone having virtually no side activities? I will ask about anything in this category. In fact, I like to start with this area because it can be a good way to break the ice and put someone at ease. I don't care if there's only one, as long as it's real. This isn't a college application, but if you like it and can show enthusiasm about whatever you've put down, great, even if it's just the one thing. I'm more turned off by someone that has a laundry list of interests and apparently never sleeps. If you have something on your resume, it's fair game for me to ask you about it. If you struggle with basic questions about it, game over. Treating everyone but the hiring manager disrespectfully. I was in a management position in fast food. I didn't do the hiring, but one minor responsibility was accepting applications that people brought in and answering any initial questions. The hiring manager always listened to the other managers' initial impressions of the applicant. So many applications were thrown out of the stack without ever being considered because the applicant didn't think anyone mattered but the person that made the final decision. I even had one lady come in and basically tell us that she would definitely be hired and placed over us in management and that she planned on cleaning up our act. We had a good laugh with the hiring manager before tossing her app in the trash. A bunch of places I worked had a system where you rated resumes you were handed. Most of us used smiley faces or frowny faces. If the person was a jerk, you'd just put a sad face on it after they left. If they were nice, friendly, and professional, you'd put a smiley face on. One place used a 1 to 5-star rating. Same idea. If you, the frontline person who took the resume, would want to work with them, you'd put 5 stars on the top of the resume. If you thought they'd be awful to work at, 1 star. It really strongly influenced the decision, to the point that anyone with a sad face or 1 star got the resume thrown out before you'd even left the office. There was a guy who, when I walked into the conference room to interview him, told me to have a seat and said, "Let's talk." In the interests of clarity, no, he wasn't joking. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have a small exterior remodeling company and do all of my interviews on site. If someone gets out of their vehicle and flicks their cigarette in the yard, it's pretty much over. People are trusting us as a business to come to their homes, usually when they're not there. Don't litter in their yard or in their neighborhood. For some reason, people interviewing have regularly looked at the tools we're using and talked condescendingly about them and explained they learned on another brand or style and that their way is better. Done! I'm open to discussion about tools and methods, but the interview isn't the place, and leads me to believe I'm going to have to work hard to make you use my methods on jobs. There's a difference between making sure we're on the same page and trying to prove you know more than the guy you're trying to get a job from. And it's never about the actual tools. I've done hiring for other businesses before my own. It's about showing a specific attitude. These guys might do well in the industry, but my business prides itself on bringing positive attitudes to projects for homeowners, and those guys can't help with that. I once had a guy spend the entire interview explaining to me why we were literally doing everything wrong. He was just finishing up his bachelor's degree and had no practical experience. I'm hiring because my business is successful and growing, not because I need some college kid to come in and use his vast knowledge to turn things around. I assume he thought this would show how smart he was. I'm totally open to new ideas and new gear, but you need to show me that you're someone whose opinion I should trust. For me, that trust is going to grow over months of you proving yourself, not an interview where you're implying I'm an idiot. Aha! Note number 2 for the narrator: don't call interviewer moron. Okay, this is great. I'm going to be hired as a law guy or something in no time. How seriously do you take the position? I hire for an admittedly very easy job. I had a guy tell me he only wanted it because it was really easy and he wouldn't have to take it seriously. He was one of 100 applying for 6 spots. He didn't get it, and every time he interviewed for that spot after, I knew I wouldn't hire him. If you're wondering why honesty mattered so much, the job is very easy, but we work with extremely valuable equipment and a mistake can cost us hundreds. Someone who's going into the position openly not taking it seriously when 100 are going for the same spot isn't something I want, since you'll naturally take the job less seriously over time. Also, I've only interviewed him once a semester, it's totaled maybe 3. In his place, we hired awesome employees who are up for management positions. I have no regrets. I helped with interviews at a place I used to work at. When I asked one applicant if she had any questions, she wanted to know if you had to clock in and out for lunch, and about how late you had to be before you got into trouble. So, pro tip, avoid that. The interviewees I always endorsed were the ones who'd say, "That one task that everyone hates? I don't mind it." It was a hospital job and we had to do phlebotomy. Had an applicant that told me she didn't mind doing blood draws because she had a lot of experience and was really comfortable with them. I went back to the hiring manager and was like, "Please, hire her." My last paycheck job wouldn't hire anyone who was rude or dismissive to the receptionist. This should be 100% a criterion, because if he or she is a butthole to the support staff during an interview, they'll be twice as bad while they work there. Just because you make more than the receptionist doesn't mean you should treat them like crap, because they're the ones that keep everything running. I'm not a big computer or email person. Then get the frick out and don't come back. This is an office job in 2019. Both of my parents claimed they got laid off in their mid-50s because of age discrimination when they were both proud, not computer people. I've never understood how someone can proudly proclaim their willful ignorance. Embellishing. Job applications, like dating profiles, a little embellishment is expected to make yourself look good and most people can read between the lines. But I once had a guy, when writing down his responsibilities at his previous job, put a bunch of things like used whisk, spatula, and other kitchen utensils to circulate sauces and ingredients to bring all food to adequate cooking temperature when being prepared. It was all written like that. This guy supposedly had like 5+ years experience, and the best he could give me was a fancy way of saying he stirred stuff. I feel like if a job is going to write a long, corporately worded job post with that kind of language, they should expect that in a resume. Not saying that's what happened here, but that bothers me. Like, just say I'm going to lift a box instead of assist with handling rectangular objects. I got a text message response to a voicemail I left responding to an application saying, "Hey, I'm at the Steelers game, so I obviously don't want to talk about a job today. How's Monday looking for you? I'm available 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. I didn't even respond. I called an applicant who answered, "Who is this? The frick you want?" And I went on to further embarrass him by informing him that I wanted to talk about an application, but never mind. He proceeded to tell me I was a lying B-word and that my area code on his caller said I was in a different city and he's no idiot. Literally the neighboring area code. So the small things, I won't hire total buttholes. You don't imagine how some people just apply and then don't remember. I've had this kind of conversation at least 3 or 4 times a day. "Hi, I'm calling you from my institution's name. You sent us an application for a job." I didn't remember sending you an application. I can see you applied yesterday at 7:32 p.m. Are you still interested? No, thank you. Bye. Note that at this point, they don't even know more about the job that could have potentially made them not interested anymore. When I was a hiring manager, it was quick, fluffy, and BS kind of responses to my questions that put me off. Good examples of things I did like to see. When I asked one person a detailed question, the interviewee said, "That's not a question I get too often, but it's something I want to be tactful about. If I were to think about it for a second," and then cue response. It really impressed me how they were honest and very professional about not having an immediate answer, which happens day to day in the industry I was formerly in. One last thing. If you have an objective on your resume, make sure it applies to the job at my company. I can't tell you how many times people have an objective about getting a job in an industry that doesn't even relate to my company. Remember to update this. Yep, even I knew to change my identical resume's mission statement at the very least. Come on, fellow slobs, at least put something from a copy-pasted list of different industry objectives into your resume. I cannot abide rudeness. Please, thank you, excuse me, pardon, you're welcome, a basic. Disparaging comments about other people just tell me you have no substance of your own, and I would hate working with you. Arrogance is just another way of telling me I'm going to have to manage your ego, and I can't be bothered with that crap. You can have the best experience and qualifications in the world, but if you come across as an absolute member, I don't want you. Sorry. On a side note, it makes me sad how many people get passed over for their age, family situation, medical needs, among other things. You can't outright say it legally, but it's super obvious that this happens with a generic excuse thrown in their faces. The best employees I've had come with a little baggage. Don't write them off. They tend to be super grateful, and while you can make some accommodations, flex hours for childcare, extra breaks to administer medication, can't do certain things because of a disability, they usually go above and beyond for an employer and clients that treats them right, and that attitude is really the number one thing in my book. You can teach skills and knowledge, but you can't teach that. Once had a guy apply for a job advertised as just call center because we needed to be discreet in the ad. His cover letter and resume talked about his previous call center experience selling mobile phones and all the people he had saved and converted to his church. He kept telling us that mission work is basically just sales because you're selling Jesus. He somehow got through to the reference checking stage. There weren't many applicants. I called his employer and found out he was asked to leave after 6 months of formal performance management because he kept telling people who he called up that they could either enter into a 2-year contract for a new mobile phone or go to his church every week for 2 years to make it up to him for the lost commission. He had access to their addresses, so he would confirm their addresses and say he would meet them out front of their houses at 8 a.m. on Sunday to take them to church. After dozens of complaints and about 6 months of performance management, he still couldn't understand how that was inappropriate and creepy. The job I was recruiting for was a domestic violence crisis intervention call center to help people experiencing extreme domestic stuff to relocate. I'm so glad we didn't put him in there. When I ask a relevant question pertaining to the job they're trying to get hired for, and they say, "Why do you think you need to know that?" Those were the exact words from the guy I was asked to interview. I'm just imagining Ron Swanson asking that question in this interview. The question I asked was about BFD, bidirectional forwarding detection, and whether he had used it in a place of a routing protocol's inherent link failure detections. It was relevant because we do it for some customers and it's kind of important that you're familiar with it. I'm amazed at how many candidates lie. Don't do that. What's the worst one you've had? A guy said he'd never been in trouble with the law. Later, I asked an unrelated question about licensing and he mentioned that he'd had a hang-up. I asked if he wanted to explain why and he said he had a dishonorable discharge from the military due to a violent felony conviction. I've hired well over 200 people, mostly for jobs that involve medium to heavy-duty machinery operation. Some on the public road, but mostly on private grounds. These positions paid anywhere from 30,000 Canadian dollars to 120,000. A couple of things I did find out that surprised me as I learned the position. Spelling and grammar issues in resumes or a shortage of description really didn't end up meaning anything. At first I would throw these ones out, but later I kept them in the shuffle and found more or less the same success as a well-written resume. Clothing? Super sharp, super sloth, none of it really seemed to matter. I found diamonds and trash wearing both. What I ended up basing most of my decision on in the past couple of years has been parking lot behavior. I don't care what vehicle they showed up in, but as time went on, I discovered that if it took someone more than 20 to 30 seconds to find a parking spot and get parked, they were useless with the machinery I needed them to operate, regardless of qualifications. Likewise with guys that thought they nailed the interview and then gunned it down the road when they hit the street. I found hiring these guys always became huge safety concerns. No word of a lie, parking lot behavior ended up providing me with about 50% of the info I wanted on hiring a person. Once I saw a guy park in about 15 seconds flat. He also left the parking lot in the exact same manner he came in. Totally bombed the interview and the Homer Simpson tattoo didn't help. But the guy ended up being my train the trainer on a few pieces of equipment. If I'm going to trust you with 5,000 to 120,000 pounds of machinery, I'd better see that you can operate your own vehicle. What's the rudest question you've ever received? Had bad acne and stupid questions like, why don't you just wash your face or bathe every day? Oh, me too. I never tire of, have you tried washing more? Maybe you eat too much chocolate. Maybe you need to use more expensive products. No way, I totally didn't even think of that. I thought just, F it, I'll walk around for 15 years like a fricking pizza face, completely alienating myself from the rest of the world and being held back from jobs and doing the deed and partners while everyone else builds a fricking life for themselves because frick knows I don't want to wash twice a week. Yes, thank you. I do wash more than twice a week. Sometimes I wash on both days at the weekend. But in summer, when the hosepipe ban is on, I just go swimming in my local duck pond. I've snapped before when these kinds of questions come up. Let's just say it starts with a far too long lesson on how cystic acne works and ends with me explaining that the stuff I use on my face costs more than their iPhone. I'm not proud of this. Well, maybe a little. Are you self-conscious about your teeth? Well, I fricking am now. Are you self-conscious about your black eye? What black ow? Stares intensely at my face. How many times have you broken your nose? The answer is none. I've been asked if the government gives me compensation for being legally a midget. I do not have dwarfism. I'm just really short. Technically, you might qualify for what they're talking about. One of my aunts does, and same thing. She's just really short. My aunt does qualify but refused to get a disabled permit for her car because then she'd have to admit that she's legally a midget. Most common question asked by complete strangers, often without introduction because of the wheelchair, is, can you do stuff in the bedroom? Variations are, does your eggplant work? Can you get it up? Are you a virgin? But another classic is, how do you pee? For all of these questions, I of course perform a live demonstration. My brother gets that all the time from kids. Stuff like, why are your legs broken? He just replies, because I didn't eat my vegetables. Horrified children and smiling parents. More cute than rude. The kids I can understand being too young to not know better than to ask, but grown adults repeatedly asking about the groin functionality of strangers in wheelchairs strikes me as overwhelmingly rude. I wouldn't ask that to a friend, let alone a guy on the street. During the early 90s, I was sporting quite a plumage of long rocker hair, and during the winter and spring, or ski season, I also grew quite a thick beard. One day, I was at a gas station and I noticed two young kids staring at me intently. Their mother was also getting gas, but she was around on the other side of the car. The little boy must have been about 3 or 4, and the little girl was probably about 7 or 8. They were just staring at me. I finally said, "Hi, how are you guys doing?" The little boy turned and whispered something to his sister. She turned to me and said, "He wants to know if you're a boy or a girl." A little bit flummoxed by this forthright assault on my obvious manliness, I stammered, I'm a boy." She said by way of explanation, "He said he's never seen a boy with long hair before." "Well, some boys have long hair," I replied a bit defensively. "I know," she said. "I've seen lots of boys with long hair." "Really?" I replied. "Where?" "Oh, places like the dump." I worked at a Chinese restaurant as my first job, and you would not believe how often I got questions like, "Are they terrible to work for? Do they treat you well? Do you get paid on time and the full amount?" Cripes, it made me so sick to my stomach. He was the best boss and manager I ever worked for, and those kinds of questions irked me to no end. As if he would be an awful boss based on his ethnicity. The biggest jerks that I've ever worked for were from right here. I even saw one butthole customer asking him as if he were a 12-year-old, "Do you live here?" pointing at the floor. He was asking my boss if he lived in his restaurant. My boss replies, "No, I don't live here. I live in a house in his suburb." Cripes. Beyond treating me like gold, he used to tell creepy guys right where to go if they were bothering me. Something that no other boss at a restaurant ever did for me. I always got a free meal every shift, plus he had me sit with his family every evening to enjoy a home-cooked meal at the end of each shift as well. "Are you sure your acne medication is working?" I work in a pharmacy, and a not-too-smart woman stared at my face and asked, "Do you have pox?" No, I don't have this mostly eradicated disease. I have some zits. Thanks for pointing it out, though. This. I get so many comments on my acne. If it looks worse, it's all about the latest remedy I just have to try. If it looks better, I must be taking care of myself. People who get normal breakouts really have no idea what it's like to have painful acne that never lets up. "How does it feel to be cheated on?" by the friend of a girl I once dated. I didn't know she was cheating. When I announced to the people of my local church that I was engaged, a woman came up and politely asked if my fiancé was overweight too. I don't think there's any way to phrase that question politely. "Is your husband a big fatty fatter too, huh?" Yeah, she is. Is your husband also a C-word?" "Why aren't you married yet?" "Well, Mom, I'm kind of a loser. My mum's entire family is convinced that I'm a lesbian and afraid to come out, and lately they've all been dropping these little passive-aggressive hints to make it clear that they're totally okay with it, so I should be comfortable telling them. They all get married and have babies quite young, so that's the only reason they can think of for why I haven't produced a husband and children at my advanced age. I just don't have the heart to tell them that I'm super awkward and weird and not nearly pretty enough to compensate for it. Thus, I'm the spinster cat lady. I too love my family. They're so kind-hearted and gentle and well-meaning. They're all trying their damnedest to do what they all genuinely and kind-heartedly believe is the right thing. I think it's really funny and very cute and sweet, to be honest. They're just wrong. It's simply incomprehensible to them that someone could go this long without a husband and be heterosexual. It happens, I promise. Since some people seem concerned about my romantic prospects, I'll let you know that I do all right for myself. I'm perhaps not marriage material, which is a drag sometimes because company and an active partner is extremely enjoyable. But I've never been wild about having kids, so I'm not all busted up about that at least. I do get the occasional roll in the hay from a Brazilian guy who surfs and plays guitar and has some righteous lats and sweet guns, and that's doing pretty well because he usually leaves shortly after, so I can get back to whatever I was doing before he showed up. No hearts are being broken there. It's all good. Finally decided to gain weight? I'm white and my ex-wife is black. Our kids are mixed, but differ a lot in shades of darkness. My oldest son is almost as dark as her, while my younger daughter could pass for white. We were in the grocery store once, and we only had our daughter with us while my son was at preschool. My wife was at one end of the aisle with my daughter in the cart, and I was at the other end grabbing something. A very old lady, maybe in her 70s, came into the aisle on the same side as my wife and daughter, and she had a weird look of concern. I walked back over, and the old lady saw that we were together and started smiling in relief. As we walked away, she touched my arm and said, "Are you happy with her?" I didn't understand, so I asked her what she meant. She said, "Oh, I just mean, is she a good nanny? Would you recommend her services? My daughter needs one. She's using a Latina woman now, but I told her the problem with those people is if she steals something, the police won't be able to find her. She probably has no records. Anyway, I think it's absolutely wonderful that you let her come shopping with your child. People gave me such insults for letting our nanny do that 50 years ago, but you know, times were different." To this day, I still crack up when I remember the look on my ex-wife's face. I never knew eyes could get so wide. The funniest part about it was you couldn't even be mad because in that lady's mind, she was being very progressive and nice. I just politely corrected her and told her she was my wife. The lady seemed genuinely embarrassed, but then quickly concerned again. Honestly, when you are in an interracial marriage, you get so much discreet and indiscreet racism in public that you learn to A, not let it make you angry, and B, judge people based on their intentions. A lot of older people can express pretty racist views while having the best intentions. Sheesh. Well, at least you were able to laugh at it. It might be harder to take so well when you're the minority partner in that relationship, as a commenter here highlights. I had a client that this happened to. She was an army wife and said she quit taking her daughter out for walks on post because so many women could ask how much she was charging for babysitting. I will never forget the disgusted expression on her face and the tears in her eyes when she told me that story. "So, when's the little one coming?" says every single person you know, starting the day after you get married. It gets more intense as time goes on, and in our case, my wife had some trouble getting pregnant, which made it all the worse. I wish people better understood how hurtful this question can be when asked to a woman who may not be able to have kids. You want the question to stop? Answer with, "As soon as God quits killing them in the womb." They'll look extremely uncomfortable and never ask again. Unless they're my uncle, and then they'll laugh uproariously and ask every time they see you. I actually said something like this to someone. They knew we were having issues, but still thought it was okay to jokingly ask when we were going to have a baby. I replied, "When my body stops killing them." Cue awkward silence. While working front desk at a hotel. To note, I'm female. Me? "Hello, how can I help you?" Guy? "Is there a male on duty?" "No, I'm sorry, I'm the only one on duty at the moment." "Oh, well, I was looking to ask for some verbal directions, but if you're the only one here, do you know how to use Google? They have this thing called Maps." He actually spells out the word maps. "I can direct you how to use it, right?" Seriously, has every woman you've ever met been mentally impaired? I was in disbelief. I worked in an IT call center for dial-up customers. We mostly had older Bible Belt users. I got a guy on the phone. "Can I speak with a man?" "I assure you I'm very competent, etc., etc." "Don't use those big words on me and make me feel dumb. Get a man on the phone." So I transferred to the guy in the cube next to me, and then I heard my coworker say, Yes, sir, I'm a man of color, as you put it." "No, sir, there are no white men working at the moment. Would you like to try back later?" You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. How did you get invited? I don't know, maybe that one's just poorly phrased. How do you know the host? They could be looking for a common thread to start a conversation on. It seems likely. At my first adult party, read actual food, parents, no fireball, I was talking to a nice woman and I meant to ask her something like, "Sorry, what's your name again?" What I said was, "Who are you?" After chatting for 15 minutes. I must have seemed like a jerk. How can you be Hispanic and Jewish? This was asked to me by a coworker while I was interning, at age 19. So, are you legally a dwarf? Have you noticed how much weight you've gained? My friend's B-word of a stepmother while she was giving me a haircut. Ironically, I'd lost 20 pounds from the last time I saw her. One time I was walking to Walgreens when a woman approached me and asked if I could spare any change. I had like 50 cents in my pocket and I was in a good mood, so I decided to give it to her. I put the change in her hand and she stared at it for a few seconds, then looked up at me and says, "Is that it?" I couldn't believe she'd ask me that. Sure, it wasn't much, but I didn't have to give her anything. I said, "Yeah, that's all I have," and she scoffed and walked away. I saw her a few times after that, and after the way she had acted, I always turned her away. I came out of a store and a homeless woman asked me for change and I said I didn't have any, but I did have an extra protein bar if she wanted it. She responded with, "Ew, don't you have anything better?"
Apparently, beggars can be choosers.
So, does she not put out, or is she just one of those women's lib types? I was calling about a job and I had to go through a manager before I got to the main hiring person. The manager was a nice guy, we talked for a bit and he told me he'd pass me on. The hiring person picks up and we start talking. He sounded a little old school douchey, but whatever, then he gets to the personal life. Just so you know, this is a very family-oriented place. All of us have families and we consider it a very important thing. Oh, that's good to hear. I'm actually engaged. We've been together for about 4 years.
Oh, that's great. Got any kids maybe on the way?
Well, no, not yet. I was 21 at the time.
Oh, is she not putting out or is she just one of those women's lib types?
I knew then what a blue screen of death felt like because I could literally not process what he had said. For at least a minute. He asked if I was still there, and I lost my mind. I'd been job hunting for months, been told all sorts of horrible things, been ignored, treated like crap, and just had enough of it at that point. I unloaded on him and called the boss. He was also very nice. I told him that I'd had an issue with one of his managers. Without saying anything else, I heard on the other end, "God damn it, Jeff." Jeff was in fact the hiring manager I'd talked to.
Why have you been hanging around me and my friends?
Mean grade school memories.
Are you Chinese or Japanese?
I'm neither, by the way. I was asked if I'd been the victim of the unspeakable act when someone found out I was gay. I didn't realize how many wild assumptions I was dodging by being cis, although apparently even if you're just a non-conventional person you can draw them, as the following comment details.
I had quite the opposite. My family members asked me, "Why didn't you tell us you're gay? We all knew it anyway."
I'm not gay. In fact, I just got out of a long-term relationship when they asked me that. When introducing my first girlfriend to my alcoholic grandmother from Tennessee, seriously, the first words out of Grandma's mouth were,
"You're screwing her, aren't ya?"
Hell yeah, Grandma. Fist bumped that crap. I mean, yeah, that pretty much happened, but it was long before fist bumps existed. Not to me, but my cousin and her then-boyfriend were in town for the meet the family routine. My grandmother?
Are you religious or do you still go to church?
My cousin's boyfriend? I was raised Catholic, but I don't really go to church anymore.
Oh, were you mistreated by a priest?
Everyone at the dinner table looked everywhere else but at the poor guy. Are you autistic? After trying to overcome my social anxiety.
Have you ever hit any of your girlfriends?
No? Why would I do that?
You know, because you're brown.
That was a very awkward first date. A guy was chewing tobacco in my car and he asked if he could just spit it on the floor. Granted, my car was pretty messy, but come on, dude. Some strangers asked, "Are you Filipino?" Me? "No, Are you just Mexican?" "Oh, that sucks. Boring." Walks away. "I'm Colombian." Like Shakira. For all those wondering, my hips do not lie. And I'm starting to feel you, boy.
Wait, you're Catholic? But you're Chinese.
Further background, I'm Singaporean. Are you Jewish? Your nose is very Jewish. I'm not Jewish, but apparently my nose is very much Jewish. Jewish enough to be Jewish on its own regardless of my religious affiliation. I get this all the time too, which is funny because my Jewish friends will jump in and say, No, she has a pretty big nose. Look at it from the side. Thanks, guys. There have been some pretty awful ones regarding our decision to have an only child. The one that makes me want to react violently is, what will you do if something happens to him? I thought we were past the heir and a spare days. Apparently not. I've got 3. If I lost one, I'd lose my fricking mind and very possibly be rendered unfit to raise the other 2, who also lost their siblings. How is that a better scenario? You're white, so I don't have to pay you back, right? After I'd lent him some money the day before. I was out for dinner with a friend of mine, his dad and the guy that had fixed his car. The guy who had fixed his car asked how we knew each other and my friend answered that we met while studying abroad. Then the guy asked, "You studied abroad and that's the one you picked? Thanks, bud. You're a real catch yourself."
When are you going to quit your day job to stay home and have kids?
This one beats all of these rude ones. My dad died in a horrific accident over spring break and I had to witness the whole thing. It was a boating accident in Florida. So I got back to school and this kid, knowing full well what happened, said, "Hey man, so how was Florida?" I didn't retaliate, just asked him if he knew what happened. After he replied yes, I just walked away, never talking to him again. Not to me, but to my mum, whose son was born with apparent disabilities.
Oh, you must have smoked during pregnancy, didn't you?
So, how's your junk and sack? It's a fair enough question. I had testicular cancer. When are you going to try and have kids? To me and my wife.
Like everyone is super fertile and can conceive a child whenever they try. So, do you have that transmitted disease? Because, of course, having that is a prerequisite for being gay. At 18, I took a trip with my family to Puerto Rico. Our first day there, a local that we were talking to put his hand on my little round potbelly and said, "You'll be a mother soon. How wonderful." I was just kind of chubby and was wearing an oddly fitting dress. I cried a lot. I was 8.5 months pregnant and a woman said, "Do you know that a gym membership is cheaper than eating at McDonald's every day?" When I told her I was pregnant, she just went on to say, "Are you doing your Kegel exercises? Better hope your hoo-ha stays tight. I would recommend just having a C-section so your husband stays interested." People are fricking rude. Also, you have to admire the way that this woman effortlessly pivoted from one kind of crappy and condescending advice to another. She truly has a repertoire loaded and ready to fire from the hip. Did your dad want a boy? I'm a lady. My first name is a very traditional masculine name, Jack. I was not named after my father, but rather 2 other ladies in my family. One named herself, paternal great-great-aunt, whose given name was Oda. She didn't care for it, and the other was named after her father when he died of Spanish influenza right before she was born, great-grandmother. I go by my middle name, which is infinitely more feminine, if still unisex. My name is a source of pride for my family, it's unique and was carried by 2 beautiful women right before my parents thought that I was special enough to have it too. To get to the point, I get asked that question every time a stranger finds out my name, no matter if I'm picking up a prescription, getting my driver's license renewed, or getting fingerprinted for work. I hear it at least twice a month. It's none of your business whether my dad wanted a son or was happy with the daughter he got, but thanks for reminding me that I'll never live up to his standards because I don't have a male member. Thanks for reminding me that our family name will die because I'm a girl. Yes, he bloody wanted a boy, you moron, but that's not why my name is masculine. I also have a masculine name. People have confused me for a guy on paper, but I've never gotten that question. The dumbest I've ever had was, "You do know that's a guy's name, right? You just live around rude people, I guess." I was crashing with my brother and his wife for a mini vacation and catch-up visit since he had moved away. While I was there, he was still on duty, military, during the day, so I would help his wife around the house with stuff as she was in the last 1 or 2 months of pregnancy with the nephew at the time. At one point she needed groceries, so I rode with her to help with any heavy lifting. We went through as normal and got everything she needed, and while we were on the beer and liquor aisle, I asked her if I could hand her the cash for my beer and just tack it onto their total, since she was paying with a card to save time. She obliged, I handed her the cash and then put a 30-pack of bud in the cart. We have to check out and I'm unloading everything onto the conveyor belt and she's waiting to pay. I have no idea what's possessed this fricking clerk. This late 20s to early 30s woman decides to go all high and mighty and blurted out while scanning the beer, "You know, it's not wise to drink when you're pregnant." Jesus would have been awfully disappointed. I was about to pipe up that it was mine, but before I could even utter a single word, my sister-in-law says very flatly, "It's not for me, it's for my partner, and she isn't pregnant." The look on that cashier's face was priceless. So which of you is the girl in the relationship? Neither. Neither of us is the girl, we're both men.
What's the dumbest thing a customer has ever asked you at your job? They asked why I sent them an invoice. I work for an accounting firm. We did a project for them, wrapped it up, and billed it. A few months later, they came back with another project, so we did the work and gave them the bill. They somehow thought that the new project was covered under the previous invoice. I get too many dumb questions to remember them all. Here's a dumb encounter that happened just yesterday. When sending confidential documentation, we would encrypt it and put a password on it. It's common practice to send the document and the password in 2 separate emails. I got a message from this guy saying he couldn't open the document I sent him. I asked, "Did you use the password?" "Yeah, it said there was an error." "What password did you use?" "I just hit OK and it said that I had the wrong password." "So, did you type anything in?" "Well, no." "Could you use the password that we provided you?" "I didn't think it would work, so I deleted the email." Oh my God. A group of 4 ladies sat on a table that is reserved for a group of regulars every day. Before I opened my mouth to let them know, one of them said, "We see a reserved sign, but we're unsure exactly how reserved it is." Working in the back of an ambulance on a patient with a serious need of nitroglycerin to lower their blood pressure. "Okay, sir, before I give you this medication, I need to triple check that you haven't taken any ED medication in the last 72 hours, and I rattled off all the variations. If you've taken it and I give you this nitroglycerin, your blood pressure could drop dangerously low. Have you taken any of these meds?" "Oh no, never." Are you certain? Oh yes, of course I am. I ran through the list of potential deadly side effects again. Nope, never took any of them. Okay then, hold this pill under your tongue. Hold on, does this household name generic ED medication count? And he pulls out a pill bottle. Oh my god, why do you do this to me? This one nearly belongs in one of our medical videos. They're full of people being asked if they've ever had any serious medical conditions, saying no, and then in the other information field, writing diabetes, former triple bypass surgery, removed prostate, as just incidental, non-important things that didn't warrant bringing up after that question. Long time ago now, I got a call that a user's laptop was dead and wouldn't power on. I go and check it out, I press the button, no life. Plug it into the power and it starts charging. Press the button and it boots just fine. The user wasn't plugging the laptop into power because she thought, we had wireless. Tried to diagnose someone's connection problem for 20 minutes before I overheard splashing and kids. Asked where they were and they were at the pool. They thought the office Wi-Fi extended to anywhere on the planet, apparently. Mildly relevant, I used to work the counter in parts at Subaru, and my manager was helping a customer, which was a rare occurrence for him. And he turned to me and asked, how many days do we have for a 45-day return? Selling paint. A woman wants to paint her fence. I give her advice and explain her how to prepare the surface. She then asks, do I need anything to apply the paint? I'm like, yeah, a roller or a brush. And she just said, oh, I can't just splash the paint on the fence? She was dead serious. Woman, this is not Looney Tunes, this is the real world. Vet tech. A lot of people think their dog's teats are ticks. A lot. One man even pulled a, but he's a boy, on us. I used to work as a bank teller. A lady came up to me and asked to withdraw money. I informed her that she couldn't withdraw money because her account was overdrawn. She was immediately upset, so I had her account checked for fraud. She then explained that all those charges were in fact hers and she wasn't expecting any payments. She was spending money she knew she didn't have. She then asked me why we couldn't just give her more money. It was so weird for me to explain to an adult that banks don't just give out endless streams of free notes. For my name. Not the question itself, but the reason why he asked. I was volunteering as a cashier at a used bookstore for the library. Not my regular job, but I do it often. In comes this older fella who buys a big stack of books for about $10. He was really nice and chatty, though he didn't seem completely aware mentally. Not a big deal, I just had to explain sales tax and the book pricing a couple of times before he seemed to get it. He pays by credit card and I explain to him how to sign the touchscreen for the payments to go through. This is where he asks for my name. I tell him. He takes the iPad and says he really appreciated my service and happily tells me he's going to sign my name for the card so they will know to send the money to me. Before I can say, no, wait, he's submitted the signature. I can't see his receipt, but he keeps telling me I was great and to keep the change, so I assume he was being legit. I guess I couldn't call it dumb, just bizarre. Made me wonder if he's been signing cashier names the entire time he's had a credit card. Thank goodness the card companies never check those things. When I asked, for here or to go, I get a confused look followed by, what would you recommend? If they have to ask, definitely to go. Can we open the curtains to make the screen brighter while pointing at a projector and screen setup? She seriously thought that more light in the room would make everything brighter as if the projection was some sort of moving painting. I work in AV and I confirm that I've got this question. Also, I get, this doesn't look like it does on my computer. Of course, projecting light looks different than an LED display, especially when you rent the cheapest projector for the biggest screen size. I worked at Kinko's and on 3 separate occasions different people angrily asked me why I returned their faxed document to them. They thought that a fax machine was some kind of Willy Wonka thing that sent their original piece of paper to the recipient. A few years ago, far more recent than it should be, I had to send a document to the local council. They asked me to fax it. I asked if I could just scan and email it, and they said no because we need the original. As a 30-year-old who doesn't actually know what a fax is or how it works, I still have the basic sense to know that it doesn't consume the documents fed into it, send the raw material through the ether and reassemble it as the original document on the other side. I think if we'd developed literal teleportation, we would have found other uses for it. I used to work in a call center for a large bank, and a customer phoned while he was in one of the branches and said the queue was too big, so he wanted me to help him. I asked what his query was, and he said the ATM was broken, so he had to withdraw cash. I asked how I could possibly help him withdraw cash from the bank over the phone, and he said, "Why can't you just fax it to me?" Renovating a major hospital when the owner changes their mind again and wants to change the plan after we've started construction. You guys can take care of that, right? With no extra cost? Oh, and the end date won't change, will it? We sure as frick can't, Steve, and it sure as frick will. Those changes are going to cost another $100,000, and now we need to go and buy completely different materials and figure out what the frick you're talking about. The schedule is effed now. This is why construction never ends on the first given end date. I love arguing over change orders. It's seriously my favorite part of the job. You signed a contract for a Chevy and now you want a Cadillac? Frick you, pay me. Library. Once I checked out several books to a woman and told her the return date. She looked at her friend, then back at me and said, shocked, "You mean I have to bring the books back?" Similar but opposite, at a bookstore I worked at, we changed our return policy from 1 month to 14 days. And so many customers angrily shouted that they couldn't possibly finish a book that fast. We calmly told them, that's the point. We aren't the library. When you buy a book, it's to keep. People buy books, read them, and return them? What the frick? Go to the library, you goddamn jerks. I used to work in computer sales and repairs. Had a customer come up who was maybe 23 years old saying she couldn't get her laptop to open something. So I took it and opened it and casually asked, "What is it that you can't get open?" She looks at me, shocked, as I open the laptop screen and tells me, "I have been trying for hours to get it to open. How did you do that?" I looked at her, not knowing how to respond, and close it and open it again. She takes it and walks out saying thank you. I took a long look at my computer I was working on and decided that this was the moment that made me quit the job. In short, this woman just didn't know how to physically open her laptop, but she couldn't explain that to me. Worked at a coffee shop where we sell 2 sizes, small and large. I was working the register, ringing up a girl. I asked her what kind of coffee she got, which went fine, but when I asked small or large, she responded with a suspicious, "Why do you need to know? Are you fricking kidding me? Because one is a larger quantity than the other and you pay for that extra amount." When I told her as much, she scoffed and grudgingly told me, "Like, do you think I'm tricking you?" I had another lady at a different coffee shop who was very upset that her Starbucks gift card was not valid, despite the fact that we were very much not a Starbucks. There are more. Working in customer service for 10 years will do that. I work in pharma, as in pharmaceutical company, not a pharmacy, and someone called yelling at me to stop selling her son green herb. I think she thought that somehow we were tied up in the manufacture of illicit substances simply because we made medical ones. I worked at a Mongolian restaurant that served white rice. A guest honestly didn't know what rice was when I offered him some. I had to explain it as those little white things. After 10 seconds of me trying to figure out if he was just messing with me, he looked at me still confused and I just said, "Never mind." Someone once asked me, "Why are you guys making it so difficult to find a car parking spot this time of year?" It was Christmas time and I was a casual working in a tiny store in a huge shopping center. I didn't even know what to say. How about, "Because we hate you. In fact, we're going to frame you for murder." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work at an Italian restaurant and this guy was looking at ordering a salad. When I asked what dressing he wanted, he kept going back to the pasta sauces and saying, "Sugo, that would be good on a salad, wouldn't it? I'll get that." And I tried to explain, "Sir, those are for pastas, you got the Mediterranean salad." And he responded, "You're right, maybe carbonara, another pasta sauce." I don't get what he wasn't understanding. He seemed like a normal smart dude, but he just couldn't comprehend the differences between dressings and sauces. Reminds me of a lady who assumed everything on the menu was some kind of omelet. "I'll take the skirt steak omelet." That's actually just a skirt steak. Perhaps I could substitute the French fries for eggs for you. "Oh, it's not an omelet? How about this Greek salad omelet?" "Ma'am, that's just the Greek salad. The egg dishes are on this side of the menu, and the ones that are omelets say omelet in the description." Eventually, she picked an omelet that she ended up really liking, but another guy at her table sent back his croque monsieur because he thought it would be an omelet. I don't know what made them think we were an omelet restaurant or something. I mean, in these customers' defenses, I've heard of otherwise intelligent people who by some weird quirk of neurodysfunction just seem completely incapable of reading menus. I will say I've never had 2 in any of my restaurants at the same time, though. Library clerk here. "Do you have a phone number for celebrity phone numbers?" "No, sir. No, we don't." I worked at Old Navy and an elderly lady walked in and asked where the boats were.
She had never been inside an Old Navy and assumed it was some kind of boating store. Someone once effectively told me they were allergic to air. I used to work in an optician's where we'd carry out pressure tests, a few puffs of air onto the surface of your eye, where quite literally the machine just blows your eye with, air. The customer was adamant that she was allergic to it, couldn't have it done, and in fact accused me of not knowing what I was talking about. This one was just 2 hours ago. One of my users came today with an iPad. When I asked what the problem was, she just said that when she holds the power button and home button down for 10 seconds, the tablet shuts off and takes a minute to restart. That was her whole problem, that if she holds the power button, it turns off. She called it the fricking power button. She was trying to reboot it because it was acting weird, and then got startled when it did. I used to work at a fine jewelry kiosk in a mall. Our jewelry included items like gold bracelets and necklaces bonded with sterling silver rings with cubic zirconia gems, gold engagement rings with diamond chips clustered together rather than one large diamond, etc. I had a lot of regulars, and this one woman would come in often and ask of every item she was interested in, "Is this real?" I explained what bonded means and how we don't sell diamond rings for $25, but the rings were indeed certified sterling silver with synthetic gems. I gave her information like this over and over again, day after day, and she would follow up every explanation with, "Okay, but is it real?" I used to work at a grocery store deli. My co-workers for some reason got more stupid questions than anyone else. We'd swap stories every shift, but one went a little like this. "Hi, what can I get you?" "The 8-piece chicken." How many pieces are in it?" How many pieces are in the 8-piece chicken?" There are 8 pieces in the 8-piece chicken." "Okay, I'll have that, please." To be fair, the lady was awfully polite, but how many pieces are in the 8-piece chicken is still a stupid question. A few people suggested maybe she meant how many of each piece. No, she meant how many pieces are in the 8-piece chicken. I said 8, packaged it up, and she went away happy as a clam. "Can I have chicken medium rare?" No, you cannot. I once had the exact same thing happen. The girl, "Can I have the steak medium rare, please?" Guy, "I would like the chicken medium rare as well." "I can't do that, sir, it's salmonella." Then she had to explain to him why you can't eat chicken medium rare. When my brother was 15 and working at Woolworth's supermarket, a woman asked him the quantities of paracetamol she could administer to the kids. He said, "The only advice I can give you is to not take medical advice from a 15-year-old. She just stormed off like he was rude. Being a good bloke, he got me a job there too. I had this bogan come up and we had this lovely interaction. They said, "You got any more of that purple crap?" "I'm sorry?" "You know, purple." I gave her a blanked, shocked stare. She said, "You're frickin' useless." I work in a bank. Actually, not even a bank, it's an advice center, so no cash or anything like that, not that anyone reads the signs on the way in. I had a pair of women come in, and one says that the other is visiting from France and needs to check how much is in her account, and can I tell her? I ask if she's a customer of this bank, thinking maybe she's a student learning English and has set up an account, because that's quite common. But no, she wanted me to tell her the balance in her French bank account. Work at a zoo, and one year they did a big TV advert to highlight Night Zoo, since we're open until 9 p.m. during summer. At around noon, a woman asked me where was the night zoo. I said, here, but in 6 hours. Working as a flight attendant, London to Miami, in business class. Mum with 1 toddler and 1 5-year-old boards and immediately spots me and asks, "Where's the crash?" I'd like to clarify, my airline does not and has never offered a childcare on board. She was adamant that we should and continued to palm her children off on the crew for the rest of the flight. Luckily, the kids were fairly quiet. Sounds like this woman was successful in her quest to escape the most basic requirements of parenthood. I wonder how trashed she got on the complimentary drinks. I won't go into my job, but I'm routinely asked what 80% or 85% of £100,000 is. I work at an independent pet store. We sell mostly dog supplies, but there's a small section of cat toys and catnip, etc. A newer, pretty gimmicky item we brought in is a line of catnip that's packaged to look like medical green herb. Now, the people know these are catnip products, but I've had multiple people ask, after puzzling over the pack of raw, paper-rolled catnip doobies, "But how does the cat smoke it?" Or, "How can they even hold the lighter? They've got paws." I never do quite know how to reply besides muddled laughter. I work in a poker room at the front counter. The guy says, "Can we get a table?" "Oh sure, what would you like to play?" "No, for dinner." I looked around. "We don't serve food here, this is a poker room." He grumbles and walks away. I worked at Wendy's through high school and part of college. One day, a man in his 50s wearing a bright magenta suit walks in and ordered a burger. I asked him, "Do you want a combo or just the sandwich?" And he asked, "What's a combo?" I explained to him that it's a sandwich with fries and a drink, but somehow he didn't understand it. He looked at me blankly and asked, "I want fries and a drink, but what is the combo?" We went back and forth like this for 5 minutes. I don't even remember if he ever got what a combo was or if he ended up getting it. I do remember, however, that I saw him 2 weeks later in a different city at my other job training political canvassers. He was wearing the same magenta suit. I was in such shock that I just stared at him, saying nothing and thinking, it's the combo guy. Do you guys sell ice here? No sir, sorry about that. Alright, have you got anything like ice? What? I had a customer ask for a 100% lead crystal decanter. I just explained to him what 20% lead crystal meant. No, you can't get 100% lead because it wouldn't be crystal and also it would kill you. Worked at a small fine dining steakhouse in high school. The restaurant closed at 10 p.m. and one day a table decided to take their sweet time with everything. So it was now 12:30 a.m. and I still had homework to finish and school the next day. One jerk at the table asks, "Man, I bet you really want us to get out of here, don't you?" Yeah, no crap, but I couldn't tell him that I did. I told him, well, while I have school in 6 hours, providing good service means treating every customer as if they're your first one of the night. I shot myself in the foot right there. They didn't leave until almost 2 a.m. and I was late to school the next day. People don't believe that I'm a sushi delivery guy because I'm white. My dad was a park ranger. Rest in peace, Pops. He had many hilarious stories. The best was when he was just starting out at the Grand Canyon. He hadn't learned the finer points of customer service nor the depths of people's stupidity yet. A visitor made a comment on a ranger-led tour of the rim that the Grand Canyon must have made a tremendous noise when it popped open. Dad said, "Yeah, imagine the noise it'll make when it slams shut." The visitor was not amused. Worked at Best Buy, and the two dumbest ones were these. Where are your heavy-duty TVs at? Oh, is it going into business? Thinking he means it'll be on at all times, like in a bar. No, it's going in my living room. What are you planning to use it for? For watching. What else? I'm sorry, I'm just confused why it needs to be a heavy-duty TV then. Well, I don't know, you tell me. Y'all are the ones advertising these HD TVs. The second story. Are these the LED TVs? Yep. Do they run on electricity? As opposed to… I don't know. Yes, sir. They still need electricity. I have so many questions as to this person's age and how he hadn't accidentally stopped breathing before this point. I'm a PI. I was investigating a murder and I found an old couple who were friends of the victim and he would occasionally come over to their house. I asked them when the last time the victim came over was and they spent about 5 minutes arguing back and forth with each other whether it was before or after the murder. I was a driver in Honolulu. Picked up a couple that were there on their honeymoon from England. After about 20 minutes, the woman says to me, "So, we're on an island, right?" I honestly thought she was joking until the husband starts saying, "What the heck do you think we've been flying over for the last day?" I live in Canada. I was going on a trip to Florida for a few weeks and driving down with my then girlfriend. She seriously believed we were going across the ocean. So first of all, her geographical knowledge is like an 8-year-old level. And second, we were frickin' driving. I don't know how she thought we'd be able to drive a car across the ocean. She was dumber than a bag of frickin' rocks. A business client asked me if I could recover a file he deleted. I said, possibly, and asked when he deleted it. He deleted it years ago. I work at an animal shelter. A drunk woman asked me if she could have a kitten for free because it was broken. The kitten had one eye. Oh boy, I have a good one. While stationed in Italy in the Navy, a higher-up, E7, in the IT department came to us to ask why our ship's SATCOM, satellite communications, were offline. We told him it was a connectivity problem and it'd be up shortly. He then proceeded to ask why we can't just hardwire it via Ethernet. One of my friends got asked, are handicapped people born with a wheelchair? Gentlemen, what was your most embarrassing half-mast story? I was 13, being checked out for growth problems by a female doctor. She had me lay on the table while in a hospital gown. She was oldish, salt and pepper hair, large glasses. She started by listening to my breathing and examining my top half. As I felt her working her way down, I got the most awkward instant tower and apologized. She assured me it was totally normal for my age and that I shouldn't be embarrassed. She waited a few minutes for things to calm down. She went under the gown to examine the size of my stones. She lightly touched my bag and I, finished on her hand. She also said it's normal and I shouldn't be embarrassed, but I straight up just wanted to die. From that point on, I tickled my pickle before any more appointments. In grade 7, there was a guy who was supposed to do his presentation before me. He was sitting beside me in class and then noticed that he was standing at attention, wearing basketball shorts too. I offered to go first to give him a moment to sort himself out. The teacher made a big deal about having to follow the order list on the board, so the guy got up, trying very unsuccessfully to hide it. The teacher's face dropped when he realized what was going on, but it was too late. The poor guy got through his presentation, but the jokes followed him around for years. The camera passed me in class while I had a random standing stone in high school. Guess who was on the school news intro rocking a stiff peak every morning for months? I was on the swim team in middle school. The team was co-ed and during practice I was standing above my crush on the diving block while she was in the pool. We were chatting a bit. She had just finished her laps and was about to dive in. I guess her swimsuit had gotten tight as she swam, so she went to pull out the top of her suit in order to loosen it. From my perspective above her, I essentially got a quick glance of her entire chest. At 13 years old, this would have been great, except she certainly noticed that I noticed. I wanted to believe that I was coy, but I really doubt it. To make matters worse, I was wearing a tight bathing suit myself. We probably just stared at each other for the longest 5 seconds of my life before I heard the coach call for me to dive into the pool and finish my laps. Needless to say, I had a bit of extra drag for my first 100-meter freestyle. The worst part was I was definitely supposed to switch to the backstroke after the first 50 yards. But my crush was still in the lane and I kind of made an executive decision not to flip over directly in front of her. I was embarrassed enough with a rudder, I definitely didn't need a sail. Generous metaphor. I feel like you could have played the Jaws music if you had decided to do the backstroke, but I can understand you not wanting to give your school that opportunity for lifelong mockery. When I was a freshman in high school, I had an Adidas windbreaker and had a raised monument. Unfortunately, my name was called next to go up in front of the class for my presentation. So real quickly, I tried the old tuck the boy up under your boxer's pants waistline seam so it's not making a tent trick. While I was giving the presentation, I used a hand movement to show something up high, which lifted my shirt up enough to where my member's tip was showing like a turtle head sticking out of a shell. The collective gasp and laughs of the room was all I needed to know that most of the class just saw my manhood. I had a friend in high school that got one and was called to the front of the class. He was wild and just announced that he was pitching a tent and couldn't stand up. Everyone laughed with him instead of at him. I had a huge crush on this chick beside me in high school my freshman year. Out of nowhere, I popped one, and wouldn't you know it, my teacher said, "Okay, I just finished grading your test and I'm going to call you up one by one to see your test scores." And I'll be darned, I was the second. Thankfully, I was in the first row, but I still had a rock-hard eggplant. So as I got up, I acted like there was something on my shoe I was trying to get off, and I made it to her desk. I then leaned on her desk and said, okay, and then as I walked back, I acted like there was still something on my shoe and sat down. Hey guys, let's walk like gorillas. Happened on my first official date. We were about to get up from our table at the restaurant and old Johnny decides to come on out of nowhere. Told her I had to reply to an important work email even though I was 15 and she knew I didn't have a job, nor was I in the process of applying to one. I just started dating this girl. We were super compatible in so many different ways. When the time finally came to do the deed, I couldn't get an ounce of blood to flow to my little buddy. Bless her heart, she tried and I pushed rope a couple of times, but never got remotely close to being solid. She was probably the most attractive woman I've ever been with, and I think my brain was too focused on performing, and the nerves got the best of me. We ended up giving up and talking about everything, laying in bed together. She started talking about one of her friends who had taken action to not be alive anymore when she was younger. And out of nowhere, Mr. Johnson decides to suddenly become both an unstoppable force and an immovable object. I attribute it to me starting to feel comfortable around her and still being really in the mood. I waited until she finished her story, said a few words and then pulled her on top and let her ride to completion. This day she still jokes about having to whisper sweet suicidal nothings in my ear to get me in the mood. Walked into the kitchen and Dad was in there. I had a solid one, he saw it and told me to go back upstairs. I was 13. My grandma had recently passed away and my entire family had to go to the funeral. My pants were really tight and you could see like everything. So during the service, this good-looking woman sat right in front of me. So when I started to feel the movement of my little sir, I got scared. Then out of nowhere, the fricking funeral conductor asks everyone to stand up. But since I had a raging extra leg, I decided to stick my bum to the seat. Now my grandma in heaven knows that I care about my member more than her. It was my sophomore year in high school. Me and a classmate, a girl, were going to do a presentation on plants for our biology class. The teacher gave us a couple of minutes to reflect on what we were going to do. He let us move around the class and sit across from each other on a table. Me and her were sitting across and she puts her legs on top of mine. She was short, kind of imagine someone putting their feet on a table while sitting. This was during the first days of May, so it was warm and everyone had summer clothing. We were both wearing shorts and she had sandals on too, so I was feeling her bare skin. I didn't necessarily have a crush on her, but I thought she was kind of hot. As she starts moving her feet around, my legs, like playing but not intentionally trying to be seductive, it happens. Thank God she didn't feel it because it was there and her feet were dangerously close to my downstairs area. The teacher called us to present, but I asked for another 3 minutes, saying we weren't ready, for obvious reasons. I did get rid of it before I presented. I wanted to tell her, but I feel like she might think it's creepy, which it probably is. Had to do the old waistband tuck right before walking out on stage for the first time as a 12-year-old in the middle of a school production of Anne of Green Gables. I know a guy who, while on tour, woke up in the van with a mid-afternoon stalagmite when they stopped at a gas station. He did the old waistband tuck to go in and grab a snack and drink. Turns out he misjudged some geometry and also his shirt didn't quite reach his waistband, so he had some helmet poking out. Following a groin injury, got an ultrasound on my junk from a cute nurse. Resistance was futile. Similar thing happened to me. Hot female technician did an ultrasound on my family jewels. Humorous now only because it turned out I didn't have cancer down there. Warm gel, attractive female. Yeah, no way to avoid it. Marine Corps Recruit Department, San Diego, in the recruit separation platoon, being sent home for medical reasons. I was 19 at the time and was sleeping in my rack, surrounded by about 40 other guys, all asleep except the fire watch. We all woke up to the usual screaming of the DI and I had a nice case of morning rigidity. First time it happened while I was there. I sat up and proceeded to immediately splooge in my shorts. These were thin, cheap fabric shorts, reminiscent of 70s basketball shorts. While everyone else hit the line, I had to quickly change and my rackmate stated the reason I wasn't online was, "Sir, Recruit Smithson was too excited to hear your voice and needed to change, sir." Oh God, well I'm sure that your colleagues were nice and understanding about the fact that these things happen and didn't make your life a living misery for the remainder of your time who am I kidding, they definitely did. I just went through the MCRD San Diego, can confirm that random morning stuff loves to show up at the worst times. Had a dude in my platoon get a rager during hygiene inspection one night. It was the hardest time of my life trying to keep my bearing, while the entire time the DI is screaming, "Put it away right now! Get it out of my sight! If light wasn't coming up so soon, I'd have you transform into Jack Black on the quarterdeck." I knew exactly what my drill instructor was talking about, so I proceeded to lose all of my crap. Not everyone understood what he meant. I was in a job interview with my current boss and 3 other people. I was doing a board test, where I work as a teacher, and a board test is when you teach a class based on random topics the interviewers give you, so they evaluate your teaching skills. During it, I got the most random full-mast ever. My boss realized, and all I said was, "That was a hard one. I meant the test, that's what I was trying to say," and she couldn't keep a straight face after that. "He became your current boss? Looks like you really stood out from the other applicants." Pizza delivery. You know how awkward it is to walk up to a house holding pizza and an upright soldier? It's bad. Made it worse when the girl asked if it came with the food. This morning I was having breakfast at the Midtown Diner. The bagel was delicious and the coleslaw couldn't be finer. I got a weird look from the waitress as I asked her for the check. I looked down and realized I was inexplicably standing to attention down there. While I've had my fair share of embarrassing raised flags, the worst debacle I've ever seen happened to a kid from my school on the bus. Basically, he and his friend were standing on a cramped bus and then the bus jolted and the kid's reinforced tower slammed hard into his friend's behind, and right at that moment, the stabber let out an accidental suggestive moan. The pandemonium that followed was majestic. The friend shouted that this guy had a hard one and all the kids from my school began to chant the word for it. He had the most mortified expression on his face. It was funny as frick though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. High school junior. I took swimming class as my gym class for that year. Without objectifying too hard, all the girls in the class were really good looking and I was a teenage male. I was particularly fond of this one girl that we will call Alexis. teacher decides to separate us into 3-person teams and have races, where the teacher decides to call out the stroke she wants you to use as you jump in the water off the diving block. And wouldn't you know it, I got teamed with Alexis. She went first, and as we were lined up, as much as I want to say I was a gentleman, I was just fixated on her butt. Right before she dove in, she turned and said, "Try to keep up," and tossed me a wink, and that's all it took. Bathing suit rager inbound. That wasn't going away anytime soon. It was my turn on the block next. As I dove in, I heard the teacher yell, "Backstroke!" I hit the water and thought that there was no way I was swimming on my back looking like a submarine with the periscope up. I swam freestyle and figured I would play it off like I didn't hear the teacher. The entire lap I only thought about my burning lungs and Sally Jessie Raphael, the unattractive morning talk show host, to get it to go away. Even faking a leg cramp to delay getting out of the pool. Bullet dodged, but my gosh, that was a close call. You weren't on a fricking stealth mission with that one, my dude. I was in high school sitting on the bus and I had a chick that I had a crush on. She was standing, so I cracked a joke like, "Your legs seem tired. I've got a seat for you." Told her she could sit on my lap and she took the offer. Somewhere between her contemplation and her sitting, my soldier took to salute her company and, well, she introduced herself to the soldier. I had this happen when I was a cocky as frick freshman. A girl that was either a junior or a senior was complaining that she wanted to sit close to her friend, who was across the aisle, and I go, "You can sit on my lap if you want," as a joke. I would have moved if she'd asked me to move because I was a wimp. Instead, she sat on my lap, and I got real solid real quick, and she could definitely feel it. And she just sat there and chatted with her friend for the 45-minute bus ride while I turned beet red and died. So I was about 13 and somehow had an ex-girlfriend. We'd dated for 3 months, but back then it was a big deal. Anyway, we were in history together and I overheard her talking to one of her friends. She literally said, "Literally all you have to do is touch him and he'll get a rager." Hearing this, for some reason, brought me to full attention. The bell rang a minute later. So this isn't a story about me, but I am a 9th grade teacher. I teach a public speaking class and one day we were playing a game. It was a game where we were telling a story, then someone had to come along and add to the story. I called time at 1 minute, and they would have to switch with another storyteller. I noticed this boy kept pulling down his shirt and realized, holy crap, he was totally hiding one. I called time at 40 seconds. I hope no one else in the class noticed. It must be hard being a 9th grade boy. That is a lot more considerate than some teachers, and I sincerely hope that your efforts saved that young sir some serious mockery. Hats off to you. I was in algebra in high school with my crush. I remember her wearing a nice blue shirt that day before 3 things happened to me. 1, I wasn't paying attention. 2, I wasn't particularly good at math. And 3, I had a random half-mast going on, maybe caused by said crush. I got called up to the board to solve a problem. The thing wouldn't have been an issue had I continued to sit down, but the sudden motion and shifting of my whole body caused my second brain to go from 50% to 100% in the time it took me to get up to the board. So here I am facing the wall with a raging monster that I know my teacher can see, holding a marker and staring at a math problem I didn't know how to solve. Bless my teacher's heart for walking behind me and talking me through the problem until Junior calmed down and I could go back to my desk defeated and embarrassed. Not me, thankfully, and I'm not even sure if the kid was embarrassed or if he just had world-class poker face, but here we go. I was in computer class in high school and one week we had to do presentations in front of the class. The teacher did have a podium up front near his desk, but it was back and off to the side a little bit, so no one really used it. The teacher called one student up at a time, they did their speeches and then sat back down. Everything was fine until he got to Carl. Carl was one of those kids that was never really outright dirty, but he was always a bit greasy, with clothes that were left unwashed for a day or two too long. He also had a fondness for wearing his clothes from gym class for the rest of the day. When the teacher called on him, Carl stood right up from his desk and began marching to the front, with a tree trunk jutting proudly from his groin, in sweatpants, without even trying to hide it. The teacher saw it early and stopped him on the way up. "Hey, do you want to actually wait for a minute? I'll get another student to give their presentation." Carl just looked at him like, why would I need to do that, and answered with a nonchalant, "No," and continued his trek to the front of the classroom. After digging yourself a hole like that, most people would just cut their losses and make a beeline for the podium to give their speech and wait for things to settle down. Not Carl. Carl strode confidently to the front of the class and started giving his speech. Most of the class was either trying not to laugh, laughing, looking away, or a mixture of all three. Carl didn't care. He gave his speech in full view of everyone without missing a beat, all while sporting the kind of supremely obvious pitch a tent stick that only sweatpants can bring you, and fully ignoring it was even happening. When Carl finished his presentation, he took a little time to organize his notes in front, then walked back to his seat like nothing had happened. He was still rock hard and he still didn't care. Almost every Sunday in church from ages 12 to 18. Ugh, thin slacks and a bored mind free to wander. I was swimming in a pool with some friends, one of whom I had a crush on. I usually have a GoPro with me to document possible shenanigans. All of them decided it would be fun to get the GoPro from me, so naturally I hid it in the pocket of my swim trunks. Now, I've had a rager for the entire time this was happening, so putting it in my pocket wasn't the best idea. My crush found out where the camera was and reached into my pocket. She did not grab the camera. I pulled myself away and hoped she couldn't tell the difference between a hard member and a GoPro. Back in high school, I was sitting around talking with some friends after lunch. It was a big group of us, boys and girls. We were all just talking, BSing about whatever, and suddenly I look over and my buddy is looking at me, laughing and whispering to the girl next to him. Then she looks at me and starts laughing. I have no idea what's going on. Other people start looking across because of their commotion, and eventually everyone sitting across from me in the circle were looking at me laughing. I'm stumped. I know it's me somehow, but I don't know what they're looking at. I start checking that my hair wasn't sticking up or that I'd spilled some food on my shirt. I'm starting to panic a little bit more, and more of the group is laughing at me. It's like one of those dreams where you're in class, undressed, and everyone laughs except it isn't a dream, and I can't figure it out. Finally, I look down. Like, what the frick is going on here, and I can see it. Back then, really loose jeans were the style one wore, and mine were oversized and really loose on me. So while I didn't have a full mast, a huge fold of fabric right on the fly area was sitting up well on its own, and as far as anyone could tell, I was just sitting there talking to all my friends with a monster. Naturally, I reacted with the measured confidence of your average 15-year-old kid and panicked. I started imploring that it wasn't really what they thought it was, making them all laugh harder in disbelief. So in a fit of desperation, I decided to demonstrate as much by slapping down the fly of my jeans to flatten out the fabric to make my case. Naturally, with only a loose bit of fabric between my full-speed hand and my deflated junk, I make contact with my soft sir at full speed and proceed to give myself the mother of all package checks, which of course makes it look like I just smacked the ever-loving crap out of my raging mini-me, having the exact opposite effect that I'd intended. So now I'm falling out of my chair in near tears, 70% pain, 20% embarrassment, and 10% laughing at myself. And all of my friends are just laughing even harder, now that I've seemingly confirmed their suspicions. So there. Yep, I think most men my age have had the experience of desperately and guiltily trying to demonstrate that a fold of loose pants fabric is indeed just that. Never helps the situation. Oh well. 8th grade English, my friend John sat next to me and had a really cute girl sit next to him on the other side. We had one of those very thick textbooks, like 1,200 pages or something. One afternoon, while the teacher was talking and writing on the board, John leans over and taps me on the shoulder. Hey, watch this. He had that particular smile that told me I was going to regret whatever happened next. He closes his textbook, slides the text onto his lap, checks the teacher one more time, and leans over to tap Steph on the shoulder. Hey Steph, check this out. Push-ups. Steph looks over and utters an, "Oh my god." She then leans over for a closer look and goes, "How are you doing that? Is that with your legs?" At this point, John's face turns positively evil, and he utters those words we all wish we could say. "That's not my leg." Needless to say, Steph turned bright red, as did I. John cracked up out loud, drawing the teacher's attention, and the rest of the class was spent explaining what happened every time the teacher turned his back. Well, it was 6th grade and I had a hot teacher, Mrs. K. It was the middle of the year and it was a boring day. Me being 12, I saw that she had on pantyhose and a miniskirt, so I began to daydream. I was completely solid and then she began another assignment. Problem was that she asked someone to pass it out, and that someone was me. So I got up and walked around like a duck with my hands in my pockets and walked super slowly and passed them out with one hand. Every guy knew why. I was a junior in high school and was in my personal finance class, and I was wearing just sweatpants with no boxers because they got too sweaty during gym, so I was rocking it commando. We were giving presentations on something along the lines of how we were going to be financially independent, and we had all of our papers in a stack, and whatever paper she pulled out had to present. When the teacher called my name, I was still at full mast, so I just waistbanded it. About halfway through my presentation, my Johnson relaxes enough to fall out of my waistband and is just angled up down my pant leg in full view of 30 classmates. This one girl takes a picture of it and sent it in a group that I was in with the cool juniors, who weren't narcs, when we were planning parties. Apparently some people thought I had a huge member due to the way the fabric fell down my leg, so it looked like I had an extra 2 inches. So it all worked out in the end.
Children of hoarders. When did your parents go beyond the point of no return? My grandmother was a hoarder, but only with food. She would buy in bulk and never throw anything away, even if it was past the expiration date. When we visited, we would very quietly throw some things away and not tell her. There was a jar of pickles in her fridge that was older than me. I'm 27. She did it because she grew up in extreme poverty and neglect. Her mother would just abandon her and her siblings for days, and they would be reduced to digging through trash to eat. When she grew up, she made sure that there would always be food available. This is a thing about children of the Great Depression. My grandmother was happy as a clam when she found out about big box stores like Costco. So much food, most of it inedible and way past due. I lived with my mum and my grandmother, who were both hoarders. The point of no return began when my grandmother got divorced and moved into a smaller house. That's when the "there's no room for anything" excuse became a thing. I think it's just because my grandmother loves shopping. It's her hobby. She will go to places like Kmart and Big Lots and look at their sale shelves for the best deals and get basically whatever is on the shelf. She forgets what she buys too. On multiple occasions, she'll buy me the same book twice, and for Christmas, she literally gets me whole garbage bags worth of small dumb stuff that was on sale. Women's socks in this case. She even apologizes because there were more presents, but she'd lost them. So decades of losing things results in massive piles of forgotten crap, and she's afraid to just have me or some company go through it because her precious items might be in there. I have a diamond necklace somewhere in there. She hasn't seen that necklace in 20 years. I noticed my dad was over the edge when every cardboard box that entered the house was not allowed to leave because I can't find a use for it. And we also at one point had 14 miniature schnauzers in a single-story suburban house because we don't have one in that color yet. God, the animal hoarding really gets to me. My mother-in-law had to have a chihuahua in every color. Never took the time to potty train any of them and never really paid much attention to them. But she had one in every color. Those poor dogs. Dated a girl whose parents were both established hoarders. In fact, they both already had separate homes and never lived together, because each home was already packed with their respective stuff. That's starting out beyond the point of no return. I should note that although we dated exclusively for 7 months, she'd never invite me back to her place, saying, "It's just a bunch of boxes." I have a feeling that she had the hoarding thing going on as well. In my experience, children of hoarders either hold on to everything or hold on to nothing. I can imagine that after growing up there, you'd either accept it as the normal way of life or completely reject your parents' ways, as many children are wont to do. Must feel very liberating going from smelly, claustrophobic madness to a clinical, empty flat. My mother was a hoarder. I don't know when it started. It was well established by the time I was born. She had been forced to give up 2 babies for adoption in her teens, with rumors unconfirmed that it was a close family member that was the father. After that, it always seemed that she spent the rest of her life trying to fill up the hole that those 2 babies left in her heart. She had 6 more children of her own, plus adopted a 7th, me. And then she just started collecting random homeless people and giving them a place to stay. Our house was a typical hoarder's house, filthy and wall-to-wall with junk piled and stacked. It was a horrible embarrassment, and I wonder sometimes how I'd be different if I'd been raised in a normal home. After we kids were grown, sometimes we would come in collectively and do a massive cleanup of the house, and I can still remember the look of sadness and grief on my mum's face when she would sit and watch passively as we carried off all of her piles of junk. And then she would hide as much junk as she could, to keep us from getting rid of it all. That's when I realized she had a weird dysfunctional attachment to this stuff that normal people don't feel. Prior to that, I'd always just thought of her as lazy or maybe just horribly ignorant of how to organize things. As I understand it in my mother, it was loss. The terrible sense of loss and helplessness she felt in having her babies taken from her. She just couldn't cope with that, and in her mind, keeping things and other people was a way of avoiding loss. It was a comfort to her to have things and people, but never really enough to fulfill her, so she had to always have more. Like an addiction, I guess. I had another thought. As I mentioned, I am adopted. I have various dysfunctions, but no tendency towards hoarding. Both of my sisters, though, who were her natural daughters, have that tendency as well. In times of high stress in their lives, I've seen them start to hoard things and fill up their homes. Fortunately, they have a better network of support and a less traumatic past than my mother had, so they haven't crossed over into the point of no return phase. I just find it interesting that there appears to be a genetic element to hoarding. Dated a girl with a hoarder mum. Their full-size basement, over 2,000 square feet, was always wall-to-wall with just stuff, with a little path to get to the washer and dryer. It didn't creep into the upstairs until the first son moved away. Girlfriend had 2 older brothers, and then the brothers' room was filled with dollar store stuff and old clothes. The other brother graduated and moved out, and his room was filled with junk. Then the marriage started to fall apart, and that's the state I saw it in. Then the entry hall was floor to ceiling with boxes with about a 2-foot wide path that took you to the living room or right to the bedrooms. The couch was clear with about a 3-foot path in front of it. Racks of clothes stacked with boxes. Lots and lots of unopened dollar store toys. All of her kids were older than 18 and no grandkids. The kitchen was stacked with piles of old newspapers. Only about 2 open spots to eat at the kitchen table. I broke up with her daughter just before she moved out, so I don't know how it ended. I'm guessing not well. This sounds like my in-laws. The kids' rooms were turned into storage one by one as they moved out. It went from stuff they didn't want to throw out to the contents of their parents' houses when they passed away because they couldn't get rid of or sell anything. Now they go to estate sales regularly looking for cheap things to give their kids. They absolutely have good finds once in a while, but for the most part, the stuff is in piles in unused rooms, bedrooms, closets, and wherever else they find. I got laid off, so I took some time to go and clean out my partner's old room. Day 1, I had about 5 full trash bags that I left to go and get some food. I returned to the house to see her going through the trash bags. That's when I realized how bad the problem really was. Not my parents, but my grandmother. After her husband died, she started buying all kinds of things she didn't need. My parents live 8 hours away from her, and her other daughter is sick and can't drive, so no one knew how bad stuff was getting. Now, we knew she had those tendencies, we knew that she bought a lot of stuff, and we knew she didn't clean very well. But we had no idea how bad it actually was. She had a stroke in January and she wanted to be in her own home. So my aunt, the one who can't take care of herself, moved in to try and help her get back on her feet. Predictably, this was a terrible idea. She lasted 6 weeks. During this time, I drove up to visit and was absolutely appalled. They were eating delivery every night because the kitchen was unusable. Just piles of crap that covered all the counters and stove. We later found out that the stove didn't even work, and blocking you from even entering the kitchen. All over the house there was just trash and crap. And oh god, the mice. So many mice. I think I saw a snake too. I told my aunt at that time that she needed to get grandmother help. Keep in mind that my aunt really couldn't even take care of herself, and she kept insisting they were fine. When I got back home, I called my mum and told her how bad it was. She was in the process of taking off from work when my aunt and grandmother had a terrible falling out. So my mum and dad went over there to take over. I drove up to help and we spent an entire weekend cleaning out 2 bedrooms. Yes, it took an entire weekend for 2 bedrooms. She had 35 Christmas stockings that still had the tags on them. She had probably had 10 years of newspapers in her living room, and when I was there, I offered to take some of them out. She got really upset and flustered and kept telling me no, she was going to go through them. Seriously, 10 years. That's when I started to realize it wasn't just mess, there was something really psychologically wrong. She got really agitated just by anyone being in her house, but to be honest, she's always been like that. When my sister and I were younger, the family would stay at their house when we visited, but she'd never give us the key. If we came back from visiting other relatives and Oma and Opa weren't at the house when we got there, we had to either go somewhere or wait in the car till they got home and let us in. So we really weren't too surprised that she didn't want anyone in her house. Once we realized the reason, I think it was because she knew how bad it was, though she actively denies it. Just being in the house for more than 10 minutes, our eyes started watering and our noses got really congested. It was clearly a really unhealthy environment. The amount of mouse scat we cleaned out of the cabinets was probably a biohazard. We should have worn the masks from the bathroom, but we'd already thrown them out. She ended up having to go home because she couldn't stay by herself, and no one can stay in that house. She had a live-in nurse for a very short time, and that person was like, "What the heck?" and quit. We still haven't finished the house, and to be honest, probably never will. Thanks for listening, it really is helpful to write out. Gosh, this was actually really cathartic. I don't know if any of our listeners are getting the Lady Macbeth-like compulsion to scrub their skin clean until it's raw. Doing these stories for so long is making the narrator feel dirty. During my 20s, Dad developed traits he hadn't exhibited before, including hoarding. He had an undiagnosed tumor in his right temporal lobe. That's an area of the brain responsible for high-level functions, motivation, prioritization, a few other things. He literally didn't know when he was finished reading the newspaper, so he kept years of newspapers stacked in his place. He was terrified of losing something important if anything got thrown away. What finally got him on track to proper treatment was a CT scan. Obviously, hoarding has many different causes. This cause is rare. But in case it helps anyone listening, other symptoms included deterioration in various organizing skills, and he gradually developed a short temper. The condition went undiagnosed until it impaired his spatial skills and his balance. This type of ailment usually gets diagnosed because of headaches or seizures, which aren't present in every instance. Dad got his diagnosis late in the game. He wouldn't have survived another month without treatment. In technical terms, it was a 5.5 cm grade 4 astrocytoma with a 10 mm midline shift. Surgery and radiation therapy brought him 2 years, and most of that was quality time, which was as good as medical science could do. Since then, a new medicine called Temodar has been approved to treat that condition, so outcomes are a little better now. It was still a very rough diagnosis. He was disabled for the rest of his life, but his thinking was somewhat clearer. In layman's terms, there was healthy but swollen tissue that returned to normal function. On the other hand, if you're able to get someone diagnosed while they still have a grade 1 or grade 2 astrocytoma, then the outcome can be much better. Only about 16,000 Americans each year develop primary brain tumors, so don't worry too much. Yet, if someone reading this notices sudden hoarding behavior in a relative, along with hand tremors and personality changes, it would be worth asking a doctor whether diagnostic tests are appropriate. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I think it was when my dad left, about 15 years into their marriage. I grew up in a messy house, but not hoarder-level messy. I know my dad cleaned up a lot too. After my parents got divorced, my mum went off the rails. Depressed and lashing out and no cleaning. It was a while ago, so I was pretty young, but I think this is also when she started buying excessive amounts of stuff and never throwing anything out. I know she doesn't feel like her job has much value, so I think she derives a lot of satisfaction from buying gifts for people. She used to go through our trash at night and wake us up screaming if we'd thrown anything out that could be useful again. As bad as it got after my dad left, my siblings and I still used to clean all the time, so it wasn't horrendous. We'd periodically clean out the fridge and clean rooms of the house. After we all moved out, it got really, really bad. Just piles of crap completely covering every surface. She still buys way too much crap and gets furious if we try to stop her. I receive boxes of stuff all the time as gifts and I just donate it immediately. I don't even want to thank her for it, for fear that she'll start buying more as gifts. As a result, I've worked pretty hard to be a tidy person and throw out stuff on the regular. I freaking hated growing up in that mess, and I would never date a girl who was messy at all. Just don't want to risk raising kids in the same environment where I grew up. As an addendum, I've noticed a lot of children of hoarder parents feel hurt or resentful that their parents chose their stuff over them. I don't feel this way at all. I know she's incapable of cleaning. I don't see her learning how to do that for me or my siblings for anything. I've watched her spend hours trying to clean even one area of the couch, sobbing with frustration and not even being able to do it. Honest question. As people who've had personal experiences with hoarding, what's your opinion of the TLC show Hoarders? Do you find it offensive, or do you think it makes others more empathetic because they can see that it's a mental illness? I too watch it if it's on, and I see it as I'm channel surfing. I see the show as somewhat exploitative, but it also gives me insight into my own parents' lives together, and it helps me understand my mum's compulsions a little better, and hopefully curb my own. I'm not good at throwing things away either, and have a tendency towards storing things that I don't have any use for. My mum hoarded after her parents died. She was unable to let go of any of their things, and it just got worse and worse. She was already a clutterbug, making numerous copies of every single piece of paper that she thought was important to family history. She was a genealogist, and buying multiple copies of newspapers, books, and things that had anything in them about our family members, her genealogical work, and the towns where our families originated. My dad, bless his heart, is still cleaning out from under all her stuff, more than 3 years after her death. It's hard on him. He describes the piles and boxes and file cabinets as time bombs, because without fail, as he's going through pounds upon pounds of useless papers, he'll find something important, touching, or really valuable. Pieces of her jewelry, photos of her as a young woman, letters from people long passed away that should be saved. It's just incredible the minutiae she thought were important, and the important things she thought weren't worth much. They're exactly the opposite of what we see as valuable or not. Mine were beyond the point of no return when they got their 12th cat. Poor kitties. As damaging as hoarding can be to the people doing it, the fact that it can wildly affect their kids and pets is possibly the most tragic part. Most animals that you see in rescues who come from hoarding situations are wildly traumatized. My mother owned 3 small businesses. During the financial crisis of 2008, the bank recalled the business loan. She refused to deal with the loss and has now idealized that time in her life as the best thing that ever happened to her, even though it was awful for pretty much everyone because how she mishandled her finances so badly and put the family in debt to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Anyway, imagine having the inventory of 3 Walgreens,
Her businesses had nothing to do with pharmacies, but they have a similar level of inventory. All the hallways, the bedrooms, the living room, family room, dining, kitchen, and the others are totally unusable. Boxes and loose mountains of product are stacked higher than your head. You can only sleep on half of your bed because the other half is covered in stuff, and to access the bed you have to climb up and over stacks of boxes. You live in constant fear that the family pets are going to dislodge something and be buried alive. You live in fear that you are going to be buried alive. That's what life was like for 7.5 years. No amount of therapy or medication or throwing things away. We once brought a dumpster to the house and got rid of an entire bedroom full of junk, but she replaced it within a week. Or any serious talks about any change of her behavior. For unrelated reasons, my parents got divorced this year. A stipulation of the divorce was that she and her staff had to vacate the home. Instead of hiring moving trucks, she was doing 2 or 3 trips daily with her minivan. My dad had to get a court order forcing her to move the stuff, and the judge made my dad vacate the premises because my mum insisted that he was the problem. It took a fleet of U-Hauls and 24 hours going hard to remove all her stuff. She's happy with all of her stuff. She chose it over her family over and over again. It was always more important than us, more important than our safety and health. I wish that she loved me more than she loves a box of expired product that hasn't been opened since 2008, but she doesn't, and I've spent a lot of time in therapy dealing with that. I'm so sorry. That really is one of the most emotionally hard things about living with a hoarder. It's miserable dealing with the physical aspects, the filth, danger, and waste, but the emotional aspect of coming in a distant second to useless crud is so much worse. My mum is a chronic hoarder and refuses to throw anything away and is constantly buying new stuff. Food, clothes, dishes, blankets and paintings, magazines, you name it. I bet I can dig through a pile at home and find it. She buys food from a discount market and everything else from thrift stores because she can't pass up such a good deal. She grew up on a farm where they didn't have it that bad. Her dad made a lot of money, but he was a hoarder too. When he died, we cleared out 3 sheds of pure junk from the farm. I may have had my point of no return yesterday. December 26th. I was at my parents' house cooking with my mum, and she said, "Can you get me the milk from the fridge?" I opened the fridge and the first thing I saw front and center was a big block of moldy cheese. I asked where the milk is and my mum said, "Oh, it's in the back." I lost it. If the first thing I see is moldy cheese, then by my logic, the milk at the back is going to be crap. I started grabbing open containers and throwing them at the trash. Tomato paste with a thick cap of mold, a Tupperware with green crab meat, a plastic container with dark green guacamole. Anything I thought looked like it was spoiled. My mum freaked out and ran over to the garbage saying, "This is still good! This is still good!" While picking things out of the trash, I just looked at her, dropped the container I had in my hand on the floor, and walked over to the couch where I remained for the next 6 hours, waiting for my ride to get there. I just couldn't stand it anymore. My father-in-law is a hoarder. I have to purge things at home to keep my wife from falling into this. For him, he sees value in everything. He won't part with anything. It's like cutting out his soul to clean out the trash. He has 30-year-old catalogs from companies that don't exist. We've had to clean out his kitchen, bathrooms, and living areas annually. The big problem is he's a farmer with tons of space, barns, sheds, and a very large house. We're dreading the day he passes away. Not for the loss, but the mess we'll have to address before we liquidate his house. You probably already do this, but be careful with your purges and your wife. A common, well-known trigger for hoarding is someone or something else taking one's possessions away. We've had the talk several times, and I'm gentle. I found out that if we do it as a weekly task, it has become routine and she deals with it easier. Never just out of the blue instantly, "Time to purge." I make sure that she takes responsibility with what she purges as far as personal stuff goes. Newspapers are an automatic throw-out. I would like to cancel the paper, but she wants to hang on to it. I have the opposite problem. My mum is a minimalist. She's also emotionally remote, and growing up, all love was conditional. I think she wanted the appearance of a perfect household and a perfect life. Any grade less than 90% was punished, and bathrooms were cleaned out twice a week. So she'd go through the house and throw out anything that was out of place. Our house was sterile and cold. The only memories I have left of my childhood are a single photo album that she puts in the basement, and anything that I've managed to squirrel away. She has thrown everything away from my dad's childhood and has 3 pictures from hers. I go into a panic when I can't find anything because growing up it meant that she had snatched it. I find myself accumulating stuff, now being an adult, because I'm comforted by things being around me. I can't be attacked when my back is against a hard surface. She gave me a copy of that awful life-saving magic of cleaning up for Christmas. Thanks, Mum. Something I can respond to.
My mum was always very messy before I was born, but it wasn't anything crazy. My father cheated on her because she could be very manipulative and, well, she's just crazy. Anyway, he left her with 4 kids, paid child support, but not much else. I think she just felt like she lost everything. Lost her home, lost her life, just lost it. She gets knocked up, with me, from some rebound guy she was dating, and that ended quickly. So it's me, my brother, and 3 sisters. Fast forward a few years and we have 117 cats in a 3-bedroom house. My mum sleeps in one room with me and my sisters cram into another bedroom. My brother sleeps on the floor because obviously the 3rd bedroom became the spare room, which was crammed floor to ceiling with old clothes and toys. Then it just started spiraling from there. Fast forward another few years and there were garbage bags of old tattered clothing everywhere in the house, garbage bags of actual garbage, stacks of newspapers, and oh gosh, those fricking TV guides. Ugh, frick those TV guides. And of course, lots of cats and cat poo, cat pee, and dead cats. Also, we could always tell how long we'd lived somewhere by how many dead Christmas trees there were in the house. We had to cover up the windows with cardboard to make sure the neighbors couldn't see in. Friends weren't allowed over, and in case you're wondering, yes, being raised under constant fear of others finding out you're a secret monster does in fact lead to some incredibly debilitating intimacy issues. But it did give me some heart-wrenching crap to write about in my college application essays. Hello, Stanford. What's the strangest reason you've ever heard someone expelled from school for? My friend was suspended because he was being pantsed continuously one day. After the 4th or 5th time, everyone realized he was just pulling down his own shorts quickly in the hall between classes. When I was in junior high, we had a large hurricane, Hurricane Gloria, which hit our town. And due to electricity being out, trees on the road, flooding, among other things, we were off school for 2 weeks. My vacation was 2 weeks plus a day, since I was sent home, not expelled, for wearing a homemade shirt that said I was blown by Gloria on my first day back. You're a frickin' champ. My daughter had a shirt from a store called Masters Bait and Tackle. Only one teacher got it. It was the last semester and she had all of her credits, so she really wanted to get suspended. A couple got caught having done the deed in the stairwell, on the stairs in front of the camera. On one of the only cameras in the school that actually worked. I don't know how it worked in your school, but there was a designated stairwell for this at mine. There was little foot traffic, no cameras, and plenty of used protection on the floors. It was a really gross stairwell. We had 2 kids a few years ago who were caught doing the deed on school grounds. Nothing really that abnormal except that they did it on the school oval in the early hours of the morning and were supposedly caught by the school priest. The priest in question lives on the school grounds and likes to go on walks in the early morning. Can you imagine the conversation that ensued? Excuse me, do you have a moment to speak about our Lord and Savior? Jesus Christ, what are you kids doing? A kid in my school got suspended for not only whacking the mule in the hot geometry teacher's class, but for not stopping when she caught him. 2 guys in my school got expelled for stealing a Rice Krispie treat from the cafeteria. Oh, this made me chuckle, but I remember how strict my school was on stealing from the cafeteria. Supposedly, if you were to have stolen this Rice Krispie there, you'd not only be expelled but criminally charged. I just like that the gravity of the situation was such that not 1 but 2 people were forced to leave the school over the loss of a $1 stock price candy bar. And the worst kind that barely qualifies as candy, too. In 5th grade, there was a classmate of mine and she was not someone who bowed to peer pressure. She started intentionally wearing obvious mismatched socks as a sign of her individuality. She was very quiet and didn't have many friends. Our teacher noticed the mismatched socks and after a week told the girl to wear matching ones. Keep in mind I'm 69 years old and this was a very rural public school back in the day. Well, the next week, the girl again was wearing mismatched socks and the teacher sent her to the principal's office. The principal told the girl to write 500 times, "I will not wear mismatched socks," and sent a note home to the parents. The next day, the girl again wore mismatched socks, and the pages she was told to write said, "I will wear mismatched socks." The principal wasn't amused and suspended her for a week. Now, I didn't know the girl very well, but I sure liked her spirit. I organized a protest for the students to support her. The next morning, there were 92 of us standing in the schoolyard, and despite all threats, we refused to enter the school until the independent girl was allowed in and able to wear mismatched socks. Parents of students were called to come to the school and pick us up because we were all suspended as well. When parents found out what all the ruckus was about, they were very angry with the teacher and the principal. Our school didn't even have a dress code. At the end of the day, the principal caved and gave in to our demands. By junior high school, her family moved and I lost track of her.
But that day we stood up for her, changed her, and she became more outgoing and made new friends. This kid in 8th grade, I was a freshman in high school but we all knew him from middle school, was on one of those free webcam sites chatting with girls and was tickling his pickle in class. The teacher was new, probably in her 2nd year, and was probably 25 years old, and when she saw his computer screen apparently she broke down in tears. That kid got expelled real quick. A girl that was in 9th when I was in grade 10 was expelled for giving the Australian kiss, down under, to 3 guys at the same time in a dark auditorium during first block, and on more than one occasion. Some guys started whacking it to the pictures in the biology book. In 8th grade, an older cousin taught me how to play craps. Like an idiot, I started running a casino-like thing at lunch. Anyway, I got caught with a massive bag of money and was suspended. My school had a policy that if you were suspended and got into trouble again, you'd be expelled. About a month later, I jumped in a puddle and was sent to the principal. They wanted to expel me, but my parents argued it would ruin my future as I had a perfect academic record. Ended up narrowly escaping expulsion for jumping in a puddle. But did you get to keep the massive bag of money? It was probably like $30, but at the time that was a lot of money to make all by myself. How on earth did they justify trying to expel you for jumping in a puddle? Well, we have 2 anecdotes from OP to judge his character on. First of all, we know he was continually being flippant and flagrantly ignoring or butting heads with any authority figure. More likely though, it was a zero-tolerance policy, which are fricking dumb. Because you can get into situations like this where a not very disturbing or problematic thing suddenly becomes grounds for drastic action. Zero-tolerance policies are also how you get things like kids being suspended for trying to stop a fight between 2 other people, or even just being on the receiving end of physical violence, because that's still being involved in a fight even if they don't throw any punches themselves. My brother's friend prank-called their teacher while my brother was at his house. The kid ended up getting found out. My brother went in and told him he was there. They'd never have known either without him admitting it. As a reward for his honesty, he was suspended for 6 days and had to clean the school. Now kids, what do you do when you're in really deep crap? Come clean? No. You lie till they take you to the station. That is, unfortunately, the lesson of zero tolerance. Never fess up, never admit, never give them anything. Just deny it. Deny. Deny even when it's obvious. Deny when it seems pointless. Because zero tolerance means they'll try to screw you over no matter what. There's no point in helping them do it. Is it the school's way of preparing to help you deal with the police? Absolutely. Always assume that any claims they'll go easy on you if you confess are just bullcrap, which they almost certainly are. Cops are not empowered to change the charges being leveled against you. Honestly, telling my kids about the birds and the bees and mortality will be easy. Warning them that the world is full of officious sadists eager for a chance to screw them, that'll be hard. I didn't get expelled, but I did have some very embarrassing accusations thrown at me by a teacher, which got me in a lot of trouble at home and school. One day I came home from school, 8th grade I think, and my bedroom had been turned inside out and all of my video games had been opened up with the discs all over my desk. I asked my mum what the heck happened and she started yelling at me about how games like Grand Theft Auto were messing me up. I didn't own a copy of GTA, I mostly played JRPGs at the time. Apparently, one of my teachers called up and said I was drawing pictures of people doing the unspeakable act during class. Where this came from, I have no idea. I even showed my parents and teacher all of my notebooks to prove that I'd done no such thing. Yeah, I doodled a lot in class, but nothing that could be interpreted as raunchy in any way. I went back through my notes and discovered I was drawing Frog from Chrono Trigger the day this accusation was made. The teacher implied that video games were turning me into an unspeakable act offender, hence the thorough search of my bedroom by my parents. I guess I'm just really bad at drawing. In elementary school, I got a referral for drawing a Bob Arm from Mario Kart, because apparently I was drawing it to threaten the other students. I was 8! That is literally the least threatening weapon in the whole gaming universe. It's a little wind-up bomb with big white eyes. When I was in high school, I think my sophomore year, there was a senior who was expelled and not allowed to attend graduation because of a tiny pocket knife keychain in his car. It was one of those little freebie ones. At the time, I believe they came with a particular multi-pack of film, about 1.5 inches long with a keyring and containing only a single blade and a nail file. I think. It was barely usable as a letter opener. The guy had one, its ring connected to a bunch of other random keychains in a pile on the dashboard of his car. The dean happened to be walking through the parking lot and saw it, figured out whose car it was, and he was expelled for having a knife at school. Same year, earlier on, someone was expelled for a short piece of scrap copper pipe found in his locker, a leftover from some kludge repair he'd done to his car. It was considered to be paraphernalia from substance use. Zero tolerance is horribly stupid. That last sentence is turning into a bit of a rallying cry in the various stories in this video. It does seem to produce a lot of unjustly punished kids. I got suspended for 3 days for this. When I was 14 or 15, we had an art project where we had to pick basically any recognizable person, celebrity, sports player, etc., to paint in a certain style. One of my good friends decided to pick Eminem. So when we were in the computer room that lunchtime, he was Google image searching for a good picture. He stumbled across a picture of 2 people doing the deed, except Eminem's face had been photoshopped onto the guy's body and Britney Spears onto the female's. This was hilarious to us teenage boys, so as a joke, my friend pressed Ctrl-P, pretending he was going to print it, and changed the copies to 500. I leaned over and pressed Enter. We'd scarpered out of there when we realized they'd started printing and we couldn't stop it. At the end of lunch, a teacher roared my name from the other end of the corridor, and I obviously immediately knew why. Got taken to the waiting room by the headmaster's office, and my friend, who had been using that computer, was already sitting there. Went into the headmaster's office, and we were both trying to stifle laughs as we saw the huge pile of paper on his desk. My friend explained fully why he was looking for pictures and that he'd genuinely stumbled upon it by accident. The headmaster wouldn't believe him, as my friend had used someone else's account to use the internet, due to his not working, IT continually doing nothing to fix it, and someone figuring out that with some people's usernames, you could put the password as password and it would still let you in. This meant our headmaster thought he'd done it deliberately and was trying to get the other kid in trouble. Best part was our posh English headmaster saying, "Who is M and M?" And I leaned forward and pointed to the guy plowing Britney from behind and said, "He is." My friend burst out laughing and we were both given 3-day suspensions. My parents weren't impressed, but it was worth it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A guy at my school got expelled and arrested for photocopying dollar bills onto a regular piece of paper and trying to use them in the cafeteria. They also found a garbage bag full of them in a dumpster by his house. Last year, there was a whole operation dedicated to stealing money from the cafeteria. They'd print fake 10s and buy a $1 item with the fake, receiving 9 real dollars back. Of course, they varied the bills they used, but eventually got caught. They made something like $900 in 1 week. Not expelled, but suspended. A stupid boy mucking around in art class, the teacher had enough of it and sent him to sit in the art cabinet on his own for 10 minutes. In most Australian schools, the art cabinet is a small walk-in cupboard with a sliding door. After 2 minutes, the teacher feels mean for sending him there and goes in to check on him. He's got his pants down around his ankles and is whacking the mule. He continues to do it as the teacher is screaming and the whole class can see him through the now open sliding door. He's now well known around the area as the Phantom Puller. This boy is not mentally handicapped in any way, just a full-on idiot. His dad had been friends with my dad for a long time, and naturally he's one of those boys who's developed a long-term crush on me. We're now 22 and he still manages to find me whenever I return to my hometown, with his annoying friends egging him on. When I was 17, I had to write a paper about what I would do if it was my last 24 hours on Earth. Being an idiot, I wrote stuff like blow stuff up and rob liquor stores. Well, my teacher thought I was serious and turned the paper into the principal, who turned it into the police. I got charged with a felony for threats of terror acts and expelled for 6 months. Not really embarrassing, I guess, but funny nevertheless. How did they expect you to write this paper? That seems like the kind of answer they were looking for.
I'm going to be a law-abiding citizen sitting at home and staring at the wall.
Not expelled, but suspended for 2 weeks. The person was accused of bringing fireworks and bangers into school. It was party poppers for celebrating their friend's birthday. People seem confused by banger. It's what we call them in Ireland. I guess the American equivalent would be firecrackers. You light them and they make a loud bang, hence the name. 2 8th graders from some school in a pretty upper-class area were caught doing the deed in the elevator. On camera. In the elevator. At school. Okay then. Well, I guess the purpose of elevators is for people to get down quick. I went to a Protestant school in Australia. My very good friend had just died from bone cancer. My girlfriend was comforting me and hugging me as I was crying my eyes out. A teacher came past and told her to move away as there was a no-touching rule. My girlfriend nicely and calmly explained the situation to the teacher, who responded by explaining that she was not concerned by this. I subsequently told her to get effed. I was marched up to the principal's office in front of all my mates, a crying, blubbering mess, where I was told I'd be taking a week off school due to suspension. The reason I was at school was because he had been in hospital for over a month and I was only made aware of his passing in the bus trip in. This all occurred before the school rang for the first period. I used to work as an office monitor in the 8th grade, and while picking up referral forms, what was used to write people up, there were two that caught my eye. The first, a kid who had popped some ED medication and started whacking it in class. When the teacher saw him and asked him to stop, he refused and kept going. The second was two kids who got caught in the bathroom. A guy was getting some action from a girl in a stall. What's weird is that the kids in the second one got expelled, but a guy I know who got a down-under kiss in the bus a year earlier and the girl who performed it just got suspended, not expelled. Two kids, a guy and a girl, were expelled from my private school for her going south of the border on him in one of the staircases. The whole thing was recorded on video and shown to the students' parents. The parents had to sit and watch their kids receive and give the deed in question with the superintendent and dean of the school. "What the frick are you teaching kids these days, Dean?" Mr. Smith asked. "Jane's technique was deplorable." "We're sorry, Mr. Smith, Jane has always been a slow learner." You know, I shouldn't be surprised at the amount of this stuff happening in high schools, but I am. Crazy hormonal teens. My buddy duct-taped a kid to a desk at his old private school, was very quickly asked to leave. He got suspended for a week because he made a poll of the worst person to have ever existed. You could answer the leader of the Third Reich, the leader of the Taliban at the time, or the principal. A line outside of the men's bathroom for free mouth-to-groin fun times. There must have been 15 to 20 people in line once they found out what was going down. She was new to the school and I guess she wanted to service the boys. She was expelled right away. Her nickname? Roboho. Whacking it behind his math textbook. When the anthem came over the PA, only part of him was standing at attention. This one guy took a wire to a socket and short-circuited it. The entire building lost power. I almost got suspended for using Brokeback Mountain in a list of love stories in middle school. The teacher called my parents and asked if they were letting me be exposed to that sort of stuff. My parents just laughed. I'm in high school currently, and last year a friend was expelled for writing a threat to a teacher and also made a hit list. Nobody would have known it was him except he dropped it in the hall and a teacher picked it up and read it. I'm kinda glad he got caught. Also, a couple got caught doing the deed in the bathroom when a teacher walked in. Why did a teacher walk in? They were using a teachers-only bathroom. After getting suspended, the guy threatened to go to the school and go postal. Yeah, he's gone too. I was falsely accused of arson and expelled for it. Junior year, I picked up a dirty cigarette habit. Kids smoked everywhere on school grounds. End of the science hall outside, hopping out the giant windows in video class and smoking in a corner and in the locker rooms. Administrators tried like heck to catch the kids, but they rarely ever did. Our halls, science wing, art wing, etc., connected outside via paths around the school perimeter. So it was a circular race when an adult was coming. At any rate, our lunches were broken up into A, B, and C lunch, with our 4th hour scheduled accordingly. I was B. After the first half of algebra, I had to go to lunch with a friend named Jenny. Yes, her real name. We snuck off to go and have a smoke in the upstairs locker room in the gym. We go back into the unused dark showers, which are maze-like, to the turnhole air vent we blow our smoke out of. After we're done, we take our still-lit cigarette butts and rinse them under the faucet, wrap them in paper towels, and toss them in the trash. After I'd finished my process, Jenny started, but someone was quickly coming up the stairs. She rinsed it and tossed it in the trash. We booked it down the back staircase, outside, around the video hall to the science doors and slipped in. Perfumed up and washed hands. Went back to class. 10 minutes later, the entire school was evacuated. The fire department arrives and we watched them hurry up the back stairs to the locker room. Uh-oh. As you can guess, her cigarette didn't hit the water in our hurry to retreat. It caught the trash can on fire, the paper towel dispenser, the wood trim, and then spread to the wooden stalls in the toilets. We were named by the parking attendant, saying she saw us cut across the parking lot where the locker door had been and run toward the video hall. She didn't see us come out. All evidence they had was circumstantial. As everyone was filing inside, a police officer quickly grabbed my arms from behind and cuffed me, in front of all my friends and many others. I was walked to the principal's office. He then accused me of smoking. I emptied my pockets. I had no smokes, lighter, matches. I asked what it was about. He insisted I already knew. Obviously I did, but I'm not buckling. I knew what sort of trouble I'd be in for having the fire department come, no matter how big or small a fire. So, deny, deny, deny. When he said the sentence, "You're being expelled for arson," he sat back and stared at me, eyes glazed and completely deadpan, gauging my reaction. I was speechless. What? Me? I may have been a smoker, I skipped classes several times, but I'd never been in serious trouble before. I had good grades. It took me about 2 minutes to process everything, kind of asking trailing off questions and gaping at him like a fish on land. There was a hearing for both of us in front of the school board. Even though they found cigarettes and a Zippo on Jenny, that witch threw me under the bus when she went after me and confessed. But she took it a step further. Not only did I deny we were both in there, but she put me there and said I lit the paper towel dispenser on fire. It made a big fuss locally, and no school would take me to finish the year and 3 months of high school that I had left. I applied at an alternative high school to have the assistant principal tell me they don't educate pyromaniacs. 6 schools total denied me, even adult high schools. I was finally accepted 8 months later and graduated with high honors. I lost many friends during it all. A few years ago, several classmates invited me to the graduating class page of my school. Even though I finished my last year somewhere else, I had known all of these people since kindergarten. The admin of the page then removed me and sent a rider email about how I wasn't alumni and never would be. Jenny tried to friend me on Facebook after she got out of jail for something unrelated. The request has been sitting there for over a year. Screw you, Jenny. In cooking class, a girl was flipping a knife around for God knows why and lost her grip. Ended up stabbing herself smack dab in the nether regions. She got suspended for violation of some safety rule or something, but gosh darn, it must have sucked for her. I had a friend in high school who got expelled, later reinstated, because a girl said that he threatened her and then later changed her story to feeling threatened by him. This girl would sit behind him in class and accuse his father of cheating on his mum and being a terrible person for basically no reason. She had this little loser minion who followed her around and basically did whatever she did. Pretty sure the guy was in love with her. So anyway, after like 2 years of this crap, he tells her to shut the F up. Then he got expelled. It was one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. This kid was suspended at my school for throwing biscuits at the goths. It was funny because he thought he was being cool by teasing them, but the goths were catching and eating the biscuits. Hilarious. A guy in my class got expelled because a branch fell out of a tree in front of his feet and they thought he broke it. My niece just got expelled from school for convincing another child to take off his shorts. But she's 3 years old, so I don't understand why it's such a big deal. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.